Welcome to Anime T23, where we dive deep into the most intriguing what-if scenarios in the anime universe. In today's episode, we explore a world where Naruto Uzumaki, the future hero of Konoha, to protect his brother. Join us as we uncover how Naruto's become Shinobi to protect his brother transforms into his greatest strength. What if Naruto parents died, and Naruto becomes Shinobi to protect his brother? Part 4. Chapter 16. There can be only one. Naruto stood from his crouch and swung an arm across his chest, pulling it into his chest to feel the stretch in his shoulder. Letting go, he repeated the action with his other arm, rotating the limbs to loosen them up. They'd arrived in Kumo yesterday with the Hokage and his guards, and he'd actually managed to get a semi-decent night's sleep. He hadn't been able to train for this as much as he had wanted to, but Kazuya had been so mad at him that, for once, he hadn't been willing to risk it. How was he supposed to know that his cold was so bad? And yes, maybe he shouldn't have taken those extra soldier pills, but it had all worked out in the end. Kazuya had now picked up the morning habit of shoving a couple of oranges at him and glaring down at him until he ate them. He liked oranges, but not with a side of threats of bodily harm. Ryo hadn't suspected anything other than exhaustion thanks to Kazuya. He would have to make a better impression on his brother's new friends when he next saw them, though. They had overreacted by banning him from training, a whole week gone that he could have spent working on his taijutsu. He had spent it working on his seals, so it wasn't a complete waste, but he still felt like he wasn't ready for today. They had drawn random lots for the tournament, but judging by the fact that there was a chance that 5 of the 6 Kumonin could advance to the next round, Naruto didn't put much faith in their random system. The tournament was being held in a large stadium under the hot August sun just outside the borders of Kumo, with thousands of filled seats and a small roofed viewing area that he could sense Gigi and another large signature in. He and his team were at the railing with the other competitors. The seats were about 2 meters behind them and a meter up. This structure allowed a view into the fighting area below, which had no landmarks, just flat, hard-packed dirt. He glanced up at the board once more. Uzumaki Naruto, Takuehi Denki, Kumo, Harada Nobu, Ozaki Sajin, Ishida Yoshiaki Iwa, Jin Izanagi, Ni Yugito, Arai Kazuya, Inuzuka Hana, Nakahara Tamiko, Yamane Atsushi, Kumo, Koga Etsuko. Naruto bounced on the tips of his toes, finally finished stretching. Ready? He looked up to see Genma-sensei grinning around his senbon. I'm gonna kick his ass, he grinned back. Kumo ain't gonna know what hit it. I don't doubt it. His sensei laughed and moved to ruffle his hair. Naruto shot him a playful scowl as he moved out of the way. He'd tamed his hair into his favorite half-up, half-down style. He had tied the bottom half into a braid and twisted it into a bun. No one could grab it and use it against him like this. There was no way he was redoing it. Genma-sensei's expression softened as he looked down at him, and confusion began to distract Naruto from the bundle of excitement in his gut. Genma-sensei? I'm really proud of you guys. I know I don't say it often, but I wanted to tell you guys now, before it all kicks off. Hana and Kazuya stopped their own stretches and looked up at their sensei with the same confusion that Naruto felt. You've come a long way, Genma-sensei continued. No matter what happens today, you're the best Genin team to compete at any Chunin exam, as far as I'm concerned. Naruto exchanged a look with his teammates before he joined them in collectively glomping their sensei. He closed his eyes for a moment and soaked up the warmth from his team, the vibrations from their laughter, and the familiar buzzing of their chakra. You're secretly sappy, aren't you? Kazuya smirked as they separated. Genma-sensei eyed them, his mouth still curled up at the corner. Tell anyone, and I'll transfer you to Guy. Naruto laughed at the horror that descended over his friend's face before Hana spoke. When we become Chunin, you'll still be our sensei. You know that, right? Don't think you'll get out of paying for ramen every time I master a new jutsu. Naruto nodded seriously. Or dango, Kazuya added quickly. Team dinner is still the first Friday of every month at your place, Hana finished for them. Genma-sensei looked at each of them silently for a long moment, before nodding, his smile soft and genuine. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Their attention was abruptly drawn down to the arena as the proctor began to speak. Welcome to the third and final round of the Chunin exams. Will Uzumaki Naruto and Takawai Denki make their way to the arena? Naruto bounced over the railing to the chorus of good lucks, rolling as he hit the dirt. As he took his position across from his opponent, he took a moment to scan him. Takawai was older than him, at least 5 years, and dressed in the standard navy kumo uniform. Yellow eyes were narrowed at him beneath a mop of black hair. He had several inches on him, but didn't look physically strong or burly. He was lean, should be pretty fast then. Ine looked between the pair of them before he lifted his hand, snapping it down as he jumped back. Begin! Naruto ducked beneath a punch and swept his legs underneath his opponent. Takawai jumped over the assault and swung his leg into Naruto's face. He barely got his arm up in time for his brace to take the impact. Using the momentum, he rolled backwards, using the same move as the cliff face to slam a foot into his opponent's chest. As he came back up, knees bent in a ready position, Takawai was coughing harshly. Naruto grinned. He darted forward, swinging his own leg. Swears escaped the kumonin as he brought up his arms into a block. He kept up his kicks, dancing around his opponent as Takawai blocked and got in a few good punches of his own. He had been right earlier, Takawai was fast. The kumonin kept up with him as they exchanged blows. Naruto had always been at a disadvantage in taijutsu, being the youngest and smallest in all his matches since he entered the academy. He had had to come up with his own ways of fighting back, since he couldn't fight them their way. He was fast and flexible, which made him harder to hit. Using his legs also gave him more power, almost equal to his bigger opponents using their fists. He tried to smash an axe kick onto the top of Takawai's head, but the kumonin snapped his head back and pulled out a kunai, aiming for his leg. Naruto's mind raced and he abruptly shoved his weight forward. The kunai missed as his legs slammed towards the ground, but he crashed into the kumonin. As they hit the floor, he flung his body away from his opponent, feeling a sharp sting on his thigh. Raiton? Raiko Hitafuki no Jutsu. Naruto dove to the side as lightning struck the ground where he'd been standing. Forming the bird seal, he sucked in a deep breath as he rose to his feet from the dodge. Futon Daitopa! The burst of chakra-infused air disrupted the lightning jutsu. As Takawai shielded his eyes from the attack, Naruto whipped through another set of hand signs with his right hand and huffed under his breath. Bunshin no Jutsu. 4 more versions of him appeared to flank the kumonin, and Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. Even 3 years after graduating, he wasn't sure about that technique. He joined his clones in diving for his opponent. Takawai stabbed a kunai into the first clone and yelled a loud fuck as it went straight through. Naruto took out his own kunai and rolled as a clone chucked itself directly for the kumonin's face. Coming up behind him, Naruto slammed his kunai into the back of Takawai's neck, and his opponent dropped like a stone. A moment of silence followed as Naruto finally became aware of his burning lungs, and he struggled to inhale enough air. His leg burned, and he felt like he was bruised all over. He dismissed his clones as applause washed over him. His head snapped up as he took in the hundreds of cheering spectators. He'd forgotten they were even there. Their chakra signatures had always been in the back of his mind, but in the fight it had been unimportant. He had not focused on his sensing once the whole fight, no point in a one-on-one. It had been almost refreshing. Takawai Denki is unable to continue. Uzumaki Naruto is through to the next round. Naruto grinned at the grumpy look Ine threw him, and walked to the wall, channeling chakra to his feet to make his way back to his team. As he popped over the wall, he greeted his team with a peace sign. Damn, Akachan, you really did kick his ass. Naruto was about to reply to his friends when he spotted the considering look from his sensei. You beat him almost purely with taijutsu, only resorting to ninjutsu at the end, Genma-sensei said slowly. Not a single seal, trap, or use of sensing ability. Naruto's grin started to drop, but his teacher continued. You are definitely ready to be a chunin if you're beating people without using your best weapons. He laughed as Hana threw an arm around his shoulders, only wincing slightly at the forming bruises. He rolled his eyes fondly as Kazuya approached with bandages, eyes locked onto his leg. His team was the best. Will Ni Yugito and Arai Kazuya make their way to the arena? Kazuya stood from his seat on the floor and stepped over the railing, walking down the wall. He watched his opponent leap down across from him in a single bound, landing in a crouch. Ni Yugito. She had a biju sealed inside her, just like Ryo. Ryo was harmless, but it didn't mean she would be. She might know how to use the massive amount of chakra that Naruto could sense. As he stood across from her, her dark eyes piercing his, he took a deep breath. He rubbed his hand together, the rough leather of his gloves grounding him. Begin. Kazuya flashed through seals, thankful for those hours Genma-sensei spent making them practice them over and over as he finished before Ni could lunge. Katon. Gokaki no Jutsu. He unleashed the giant fireball from his mouth and leapt back to create some distance, shoving his hand in his pouch to grab some of his kunai. He watched as Ni jumped through the center of the fireball and loosened his grip on his kunai for a moment. Maybe this match would be over quicker than they thought. He startled back as a claw swiped at his face, catching his cheek. He flipped away as he dodged the other claw. Bringing out his kunai, he stared at his opponent. Her nails had grown out into sharp points, one currently dripping with his blood. "You're fireproof?" She wasn't even singed. She aimed a feral grin at him before she lunged at him once again. Kazuya brought up a kunai and caught her arm. The poison would take only a few minutes. He had designed these ones specifically with these one-on-one matches in mind. She swiped at him again and he caught the same arm again, while sustaining another scratch on his own arm. If he got enough poison in her system, she might drop before he got more damage. Ni flipped away and Kazuya hung back, watching. As she examined the cuts, Kazuya flipped through more hand seals. Katon, Hosenka no Jutsu. As the small fireballs left his mouth, he flung his shuriken inside them. Ni smirked at him as she looked up from the steaming cuts. Didn't learn the first time, Konoha? She let the first ball hit her, and her smirk dropped. As she dodged the others, Kazuya let his own smirk surface. Bit cocky there, Kumo? She snarled and pulled his shuriken out of her shoulder. Kazuya's own eyes widened as hers flickered red. He watched in confused horror as steam rose from her wounds. No use waiting for your poison to work, Ni sneered, her eyes now completely red and slit like a cat. Her canines had grown past her lips and her toenails had grown to match her hands. It's been burned out of my system. So Katonjutsu and poison were out. So was Genjutsu, if Naruto was right about the size of her chakra supply. Chakra scalpels were still an option with his taijutsu, but she was both stronger and faster than him. He was just barely able to dodge as she lunged at him claws first. He tried to concentrate his chakra to form the scalpels, but couldn't focus as he desperately flung himself out of the way of Ni's claws. He quickly gave up on that tactic and dug out another kunai as he rolled across the dirt. He managed to get a few slashes in, but Ni didn't even appear to notice, as her crimson eyes burned into his. His lungs burned as he tried to think of something that might give him an edge in this match. Something snagged his foot, and he only had time to think, "Oh shit," before he fell to the ground. He fought the instinct to shove his hands out. He could not break his wrists here. A weight pressed on his back, and his right arm was rammed up his back, and Kazuya bit through his lip, keeping the yelp in as he felt the bone give way. He heard footsteps nearby. "Can you continue, Arai?" Kazuya huffed into the dirt. His arm was not only definitely broken, but still in the sharp clutches of his opponent. None of his main weapons had worked. She was fireproof, immune to poisons, and outclassed him in taijutsu enough that his medical jutsu was useless. His face was still bleeding, along with all the other wounds she had inflicted on him, and if he had to be absolutely honest, he was exhausted. "No," he scowled. "I forfeit." His arm was released as his defeat was announced to the audience. Kazuya gritted his teeth as pain throbbed through the limb, and he held it close to his body as he stood. He looked over at his opponent and was somewhat mollified to see that she was at least roughed up and bleeding, if not outright beaten like him. The animalistic features had faded, and her black eyes scanned him thoughtfully. Was this what happened when people had a biju? Would he one day look at Ryo and see red eyes looking back at him? Kazuya wasn't sure how he felt about that. He limped his way over to the wall and shook his head at the Kumo medics who were starting to make their way over to him. He sighed, channeling chakra to his feet and heaving himself up the wall. He didn't look at his teammates as he reached the platform. He sat and leaned his back against the wall, fighting back tears. His hand glowed green as he scanned his broken upper arm. Only one fracture on the humerus, but it was a spiral fracture. It would take at least couple sessions of healing to fully recover, and he would need to avoid using the limb until he could get it x-rayed properly back in Konoha. He channeled his chakra into a white orb in his working hand and started healing the scratches, starting with the one on his face. A few moments passed before a pair of sandals entered his vision. He looked up to see Naruto smiling softly down at him. His friend crouched opposite him and held out a fist. Kazuya stared at it for a moment before he released the jutsu and bumped it with his own. "You did amazing, Kazuya." "You really did," Genma-sensei added, coming up behind the redhead. She was a strong opponent and it was a bad matchup. "Who the fuck is Fireproof?" Naruto muttered beneath his breath. "I lost," Kazuya said quietly, roughly wiping away the tears that had managed to fall. They were supposed to win it all. Naruto had kept his end of the promise, but he had failed at the first hurdle. "You did," their teacher nodded. "And what did you learn?" Kazuya reviewed the fight in his head. "I need more variation in my ninjutsu. I also need to be able to create my chakra scalpels under any conditions, not just ones where I have time to concentrate. My taijutsu needs way more work too." "You're never going to win every fight," Genma-sensei shrugged. "That's not what being a chunin is about. Surviving the fight and learning from it is always going to be more valuable, in my book." The unpleasant churning in Kazuya's gut eased slightly at his teacher's words. He nodded and dug out a sling from his first aid supplies. "For now, though, it's time to support Hana." Kazuya shot a look at Naruto, and they both rushed to the railing to see their female teammate take her stance across from her opponent. Hana returned the glare from the Iwa Kunoichi across from her. The image of her teammate being pinned beneath that Kumo Kunoichi still hadn't left her thoughts. Kazuya was always the optimistic, ambitious one of their team. She had never seen him so crushed as when he'd come back after that match. She wanted to tear Yugito apart for doing that to her friend. The Haimaru brothers stood at her heels, hackles raised and growls deep. "Begin, Hosenka no Jutsu, Doton, Doryu Heiki." Hana's fireballs slammed harmlessly off the tall mud wall that had risen from the ground. She gestured to her pups, and they darted forward. She followed them up the mud wall, and as she stood on top, she directed her companions. "Dynamiku ma Kingu." She grinned at Nakahara's confusion as the three dogs jumped around the kunoichi, releasing their urine onto the Iwanin to her loud disgust. As Nakahara flipped through more seals, Hana jumped back behind the mud wall and the dogs quickly joined her. "Doton. Iwa Deppo no Jutsu." Hana heard the thump of dirt hitting the wall and earth crumbled down on her as the wall began to fail. It soon stopped and silence fell. She stood and looked through the holes in the wall. There was no sign of Nakahara. Hana stepped away from the wall completely and looked around. The Iwa Kunoichi wasn't in the area. She looked down at her companions. "Find her." The three Haimaru brothers spread out with their noses attached to the ground. Soon enough the eldest began scratch at the ground and Hana nodded at him. "Follow her and let me know when she starts to rise out of the ground." He nodded, and Hana gestured to the younger two. She threw the pair each a soldier pill and took one herself. She flipped though the seals. Inuzugari Jinju Kongo Henge Santoro. She closed her eyes as the solider pills and chakra took effect, and when she opened them, she was staring down at the eldest Haimaru brother. This technique was always a rush. No one outside her clan could even begin to imagine what this felt like. A short bark attracted their gaze. Nakahara burst through the ground. Already finished her seals. "Doton Ganchu So." The spikes of rock shot towards Hana's large form, but she swiped at them with a paw. The spikes broke and she bared her teeth at the scent of fear that reached her from her opponent. Her eldest dog clamped onto the kunoichi's leg, and as Nakahara was distracted, Hana began to spin. "Darogai." She followed the scent of the urine that the Haimaru brothers had covered the opponent in earlier, and as the eldest let go and dove out the way, they slammed into the Iwanin, straight on. Nakahara went flying back into the opposite wall, and Hana released the technique as she felt her chakra reserves run low. The proctor went over to check on the bloody Iwanin as Hana panted and dug her hands into her dog's fur. Nakahara Tomiko is unable to continue. Inuzuka Hana is through to the next round. The applause roared through the stadium as Hana made her way back to her team. Naruto high-fived her and Kazuya rolled his eyes fondly, smiling in his sling. Naruto hunkered down to hug the Haimaru brothers as Kazuya came over to scan her with his diagnostic jutsu. Not even a bruise, he announced. Just filthy as fuck. Hey, there was a lot of Doton jutsu, laughed Hana. Bound to get a bit dirty with that. Well done, Hana. Genma-sensei grinned. You're dependent on your clan jutsu, but they're very effective. I almost felt bad for that Iwanin. Kazuya peered down at the arena where she was being carried off by the medics. You literally just stomped through her last attack like it was nothing. I don't know if I'll ever get used to you turning into a giant three-headed dog. Naruto was covered in the dogs by this point. Right. Genma-sensei clapped his hands. There's the Kumo match next, then a short break, so we should take this time to get some food in you to build your chakra supply back up. Naruto, you're the first match again? Hana, you'll be third. Hana added to the chorus of yes, sensei, and went to grab some lunch from her pack. Will Uzumaki Naruto and Ozaki Saijin make their way to the arena? Naruto leapt over the railing and moved to once again stand across from his opponent. Kazuya had healed the cut on his leg and any bruises he had picked up, so he was feeling as good as when he had faced the Kumonin earlier. He hadn't caught much of Ozaki's match earlier, but he had Futon Jutsu in his arsenal. He could work with that. The Sunanin wore loose, black clothes with his head wrapped in white cloth, his headband tied around his forehead and extra fabric hanging down around his face. Begin. Futon Daitopa. Futon Daitopa. The jutsu clashed together in the center of the arena, and Naruto cursed, shoving his hand into his pocket to grab a bunch of kunai. As the wind died down, he flung the kunai out in all directions, making sure they were further apart than when he had pulled the same trick on Genma-sensei last year. Kai! He blew up the one closest to his opponent, but Ozaki dove out of the way, forming hand seals. Futon! Kudan! Naruto swapped with a kunai on the other side of the stadium as the air bullets slammed into the ground. Kai! Another explosion rocked the arena, and Naruto grinned as Ozaki rolled away, smoking curling away from his uniform. Futon! Shinkugyoku! Naruto swapped with the furthest away kunai as the bursts of wind spread throughout the arena, dislodging most of his kunai. He glared at the Sunanin from across the stadium and activated the few kunai left on the ground. He darted forward as the explosions began, but his stomach dropped as he heard Ozaki through the commotion. Futon! Daitopa! The fire from the explosions roared as they grew in size. He could hear Ozaki cursing above the noise, and was at least gratified to know that it wasn't just him caught out by the size of the flames. He saw a burst of fire heading straight for him and tore a seal out of his pocket, slamming it down on the ground and desperately channeling his chakra. A block of ice appeared in front of him, and Naruto ducked behind it, narrowly avoiding the futon-fueled fire. The flame died down, leaving behind an arena full of smoke. Naruto could feel Ozaki across from him, and he stepped out from behind the melting ice, silently moving towards his opponent. He frowned as he felt chakra constructs leave the Sunanin, and he moved to the left as a chakra string hit the ground to his right. The chakra strings moved randomly around the arena, and Naruto dodged them with ease. The smoke was taking a while to dissipate, but as long as he could take out Ozaki before they could see again, he would win this. He'd managed to get to within 2 meters of the other shinobi when he felt a sharp thud in his chest. Looking down, his eyes widened at the sight of a shuriken sticking out of his shirt. It was in the lower right quadrant, and every breath he took began to hurt. He pressed a hand to the wound, and blood began to seep between his fingers. He'd been so focused on the chakra strings and Ozaki's chakra signature, he hadn't even thought to consider watching for other weapons. Maybe he was too dependent on his sensing. Futon! Daitopa! The wind blew the smoke away, and Naruto was left standing in the middle of the arena, clutching his chest as he sank to one knee. He looked up with a glare as Ozaki came up to him with a kunai, moving to hold it to his throat. The Sunanin looked worse for wear, and his white head wrapping was now a sooty black. "Good match," Naruto snarled as Ine came over. "Can you continue, Uzumaki?" Naruto tried to take a deep breath, but the pain was too much. He didn't think he could overpower Ozaki to get away from the kunai like this. "No." Ine turned to the crowd as Ozaki pulled away the kunai. "Uzumaki, Naruto is unable to continue. Ozaki Saijin is through to the next round." As the applause started up, Naruto pushed himself to his feet. He swayed for a moment before hands came to steady him, and he looked up at his sensei. "Hey, Naruto." Genma-sensei smiled softly. "Let's get you to Kazuya." Naruto nodded, his mind starting to go fuzzy as the blood continued flowing through his fingers. It wasn't so bad if he kept his breathing shallow. His teacher picked him up, and when Naruto opened his eyes, Kazuya was staring down at him in concern. When had he closed his eyes? "Hana is going to pull out the shuriken now, okay?" Naruto bobbed his head and braced himself. Kazuya channeled his chakra in preparation for the healing jutsu into one hand, and as Hana got a firm grip of the embedded shuriken with the other. They'd have to be quick. He nodded to Hana. She yanked the weapon out of Naruto's chest, and Kazuya immediately pushed the white orb of chakra into the wound, blood initially pouring out as he shoved his chakra into the jutsu. The injury slowly sealed itself up, and Kazuya made sure that the muscles and arteries beneath the skin knitted themselves together properly before he closed over the skin. His friend would have a small scar for a while, but otherwise he would be fine. He sat back and stared into Naruto's soot-streaked face. When the smoke had cleared and Naruto had been kneeling in the middle of the stadium and clutching his chest, Kazuya's heart had jumped into his mouth. He had been doing so well up until that point. How is he? Kazuya looked back up at Hana and their sensei. "He'll be fine. It didn't go deep, just nicked his lung really," he shrugged, feeling the drain on his chakra supply. There was some minor smoke inhalation too, but that won't need treatment. "Oh, thank Kami," Hana sighed in relief. She held the bloody shuriken between two fingers away from her body. Kazuya held out his hand, and she dumped the weapon in it. He tucked it into his pouch, out of the way. He frowned at the splatters of blood on his sling. "Have some faith in me, guys." They turned collectively to stare at the grinning redhead. Naruto poked at his newest scar before pulling himself to his feet. He scratched the back of the head sheepishly. "Sorry I couldn't take Konoha into the finals." Genma-sensei ruffled his hair, and Naruto let out an indignant squawk. "You did well," he said proudly. "You showed what you could do, and you'll learn from what you didn't." "Besides, we still got Hana in the game," Kazuya grinned, throwing an arm around their final teammate. "Hana is the strongest," Naruto nodded seriously. Hana blushed a brilliant red and beamed at the pair of them. "I'm actually interested in how Ice got onto the field," Genma-sensei continued. "Oh, my ice seal." "Ice seal?" "Yeah. Remember when Akachan spent 2 months freezing us out of our own home trying to get that modified storage seal to work?" "I did not. The 2 months you and Ryo spent invading my apartment for dinner?" Genma-sensei clarified. "They came to our clan for breakfast," Hana added. "You don't hear me complaining when you make your belladonna whatever it is in the family teapot. No, instead, you watch as I drink tea out of that same teapot and laugh as you drag me to the hospital." "Back to the ice seal," Genma-sensei raised an eyebrow. "Well," Naruto sent a glare towards Kazuya, to which he stuck his tongue out in return. "I was thinking about explosion seals." This drew twin looks of confusion from the two who didn't live with him and his thought process. An explosion seal essentially converts chakra into potential energy. This potential energy builds up inside the seal and once disrupted, causes a massive change in that energy which fails to be contained within the seal. This results in the energy leaving the seal in the form of a heated explosion. Kazuya shared a look with Hana. The mechanics of Naruto's seals were always completely beyond him. Give him a nervous system any day. Their sensei just looked thoughtful. "So, an explosion seal works by releasing energy to the surroundings," Naruto continued. "It wouldn't take much to reverse engineer a seal to absorb energy instead. Taking enough energy from certain gaseous particles reverts them to a solid state, hence, ice seal. Theoretically, I could make a water seal too. A brief silence followed his words. That's brilliant, Genma-sensei murmured, his hand under his chin. Whatever their teacher was about to say next was interrupted. Jin Izanagi is unable to continue. Mi Yugito is through to the next round. They rushed over to railing to see the Kumonin walking away without a scratch. Mi made her way back to the platform. They didn't even fight. He just forfeited. Will Inuzuka Hana and Yamane Atsushi make their way to the arena? Kazuya watched his teammate and her companions make their way to their positions. This wasn't good. When Hana made it to the final, her opponents would be well rested and prepared after seeing her fight. She would be at a disadvantage. Begin. Hana flipped through familiar hand seals, and Kazuya watched as a fireball came shooting out of her mouth. Katon, Gokakyu no Jutsu. While the Kumonin was distracted by the jutsu, Kazuya shared a wicked grin with Naruto as the Haimaru brothers circled him. They pounced, latching onto a limb each, and Kazuya called out encouragement as Yamane cried out in pain. Kaz? Naruto grasped his arm and pointed. Kazuya followed his finger and watched as Yamane struggled through hand seals. Heki no Jutsu! Lightning burst from the Kumonin and ran the length of his body. The dogs released him and let out keening whines as they struggled away from the still sparking opponent. Kazuya's heart hurt for them as the brothers failed to get back to Hana, lying down at various spots near the edge of the arena. Hana's head whipped around, and Kazuya could feel the distress rolling off her from here. Yamane winced as he let the lightning die down, blood still dripping from the bites on his limbs. Kazuya fought the urge to stand back as he watched Hana's anguish turn to fury. She flashed through hand seals, her dark eyes locked onto her opponent. Suga! Their teammate turned into a spinning blur. The Kumonin's injuries hampered his ability to dodge, and even Kazuya had to cringe as Hana smashed into him full speed. A loud wet crunch, reminiscent of the Iwanins in the second stage, echoed over the quiet stadium. Hana stood tall over the mess that had been her opponent before she darted off to check on the dogs. Kazuya tapped Naruto on the shoulder, and they both hopped over the railing to help her. Ine went over to check on Yamane as Kazuya reached the youngest brother. His breathing was ragged and heartbeat fast, but he should be okay after some rest. Yamane Atsushi is unable to continue. Inuzuka Hana is through to the next round. Kazuya hefted the dog into his working arm and joined his team back onto the platform with the other two brothers. He checked over the other two with Hana hovering over his shoulder. They'll be fine, but I don't know if they'll be able to fight in the next round, he sighed heavily, petting the eldest's head gently. Shit, Naruto swore, one of the dog's head resting in his lap. It's okay. Hana began to pace. What matters is that they're going to be okay? I can fight in the final by myself. Kazuya frowned as Hana rested her forehead against the youngest brother's head. He shared a worried look with Naruto. The late afternoon sun shone over the packed stadium as the proctor moved to stand in the center of the arena. This is the last battle of the third round of the Kumogakure Chunin exams. Will Ozaki Saijin, Mi Yugito, and Inuzuka Hana make their way to the arena? Hana stood and smiled shakily at her team, petting her brilliant companions on their heads before jumping down alone to take her place next to Ine. She stared at her opponents for a moment. They had each taken out her teammates. She prepared to leap back and flip through the seals. Begin. Futon. Daitopa. Katon. Kanhisame no Jutsu. Doton. Iwakage Seki no Jutsu. The earth rose to cover Hana in a dome as the other two techniques collided outside. She could hear something thumping on the roof of her dome, and dirt crumbled on her head as she waited for it to die down. Thank Kami, her cousin had taught her the only defensive technique she currently had in her repertoire. She had a tendency to focus on the offensive. The noise died down, and she punched through a weaker section, peering out. Kicking through the rest of that section, she stepped out of the dome and looked around at the scorched earth. She peered back at her dome and gulped at the streaks of black covering the structure. Turning, she spotted me staring her down, the still smoking heap of Ozaki off to the side. Guess he wouldn't be an issue in this match anymore. She watched as Mii's claws grew in the same way as Kazuya's match, and she responded with her own hand signs. Giju Ninpo, Shikyaku no Jutsu. Hana hit the ground on all fours, feeling her own teeth and nails lengthen. She growled at the Kumonin, who hissed in response. There was a beat of silence before Hana lunged at Mii, claws outstretched as she tried to slice any visible skin. She snapped at Mii's wrist as the Kumonin swung at her neck. It was a near miss for them both. Swinging a leg out, Hana tried to catch Mii's knee, but her opponent jumped and crashed directly into her. The pair smashed into the ground and rolled, grappling as they each tried to gain the upper hand. Hana caught Mii's torso with her claws, but before she could do more damage, a foot slammed into her cheek. She scrambled away from her opponent and spat out the blood pooling in her cheek. Mii's now red slit eyes met Hana's, and Hana grinned. She hoped the blood covering her teeth unsettled the other kunoichi. Mii flashed her own grin, tongue flicking out to lick the blood dripping down her face from Hana's earlier swipe. Despite herself, Hana could feel herself having fun. Nei was good, and she loved stretching her skills like this. It was strange fighting without the Haimaru bothers, but she knew they were safe. She just had to worry about herself. They collided once more, and Hana ducked beneath a swipe, landing a punch in Mii's gut. She smirked at the oof that escaped her opponent and got in another hit to her chest. She pulled back to land another, but she felt a blow hit her knee. It popped out of place. She hit the ground hard and couldn't straighten the joint back out. Her sharpened canines pierced her lips as she bit down to keep the pained yelps from escaping. She felt sudden pressure on her neck and looked up, Mii pressing her foot onto her neck. "Can you continue, Inuzuka?" Hana huffed and allowed her transformation to fade, hand going down to grip her knee. No. Mii took her foot off and allowed her own features to return to normal. She stared down at Hana for a long moment before offering a hand. Hana stared at it, confused for a moment before she took it, being heaved to her feet. She hopped in place as the announcement was made. Ozaki Saijin and Inuzuka Hana are unable to continue. Ine came over to lift Mii's hand into the air. Mii Yugito is the winner of the Kumogakure Chunin exams. Hana felt hands supporting her and turned to smile at her teammates. It was finally over. They could all go home. Raiko Hitafuki no Jutsu, Lightning Release, Lightning Blast Technique. Futen Dai Topa, Wind Release, Great Breakthrough. Bunshin no Jutsu, Clone Technique. Kokaki no Jutsu, Fire Release, Great Fireball Technique. Hosenka no Jutsu, Phoenix Sage Fire Technique. Dodoryu Heiki, Earth Release, Earth Style Wall Dynamiku, Makingu, Dynamic Marking. Doton, Iwedepo no Jutsu, Earth Release, Rock Gun. Inuzuka Ryuja Kongo Heng, Santoro, Inuzuka Style Rare Beast Transformation, Three-Headed Wolf. Doton Ganchuso, Earth Release, Rock Pillar Spears. Garoga, Dual Wolfang Kuden, Release Air Bullets. Shinkugyoku, Release Vacuum Sphere. Heki no Jutsu, Burst Technique, Tsuga Piercing. Katon, Kain Hisame no Jutsu, Fire Release, Incinerating Hail Technique. Doton, Iwagasuki no Jutsu, Earth Release, Rock Shelter. Gishikyaku no Jutsu, Imitation Beast, Ninja Art, Four Legs Technique. She felt sudden pressure on her neck and looked up, Mii pressing her foot onto her neck. "Can you continue, Inuzuka?" Hana huffed and allowed her transformation to fade, hand going down to grip her knee. No. Mii took her foot off and allowed her own features to return to normal. She stared down at Hana for a long moment before offering a hand. Hana stared at it, confused for a moment before she took it, being heaved to her feet. She hopped in place as the announcement was made. Ozaki Saijin and Inuzuka Hana are unable to continue. Ine came over to lift Mii's hand into the air. Mii Yugito is the winner of the Kumogakure Chunin exams. Hana felt hands supporting her and turned to smile at her teammates. It was finally over. They could all go home. Raiton, Raiko Hitafuki no Jutsu, Lightning Release, Lightning Blast Technique. Futai Topa, Wind Release, Great Breakthrough. Bunshin no Jutsu, Clone Technique. Kokakyu no Jutsu, Fire Release, Great Fireball Technique. Katon Hosenka no Jutsu, Fire Release, Phoenix Sage Fire Technique. Doton, Doryu Heki, Earth Release, Earth Style Wall, Dynamiku Makingu, Dynamic Marking. Doton Iwadepo no Jutsu, Earth Release, Rock Gun. Inuzuka Ryu, Jinjungo Heng, Santoro, Inuzuka Style, Rare Beast Transformation, Three-Headed Wolf. Doton Ganshuso, Earth Release, Rock Pillar Spears. Garoga, Dual Wolf Fangtun, Kuden Release Air Bullets. Fudenshinkagyoku, Wind Release Vacuum Sphere. Heki no Jutsu Burst Technique. Suga Piercing Fang. Katon and Hisame no Jutsu Fire Release Incinerating Hail Technique. Doton Iwakagesuki no Jutsu Earth Release Rock Shelter. Gijun Impo, Shikyaku no Jutsu Imitation Beast Ninja Art, Four Legs Technique. Chapter 17, Moving Forward, One Step at a Time. Genma stood proudly behind his team as they waited for the Hokage to speak. They had gone above and beyond any expectations he'd had for them. He'd meant it when he'd said they were the best team, and they had proved it to the entire elemental nations. They'd arrived back home yesterday morning, and his team were looking a bit better after a day off and a trip to the hospital. Naruto was back in orange and Kazuya in his purple tunic. Even Hana had donned a colorful blue striped jumper. Genma was grateful that they listened to him and wore black on missions, but couldn't help but prefer his team like this. Bright and comfortable and cheerful. The Hokage took his pipe out his mouth and considered the three genin. It was a very good showing at the Chunin exam this year, he said, eyes twinkling. Raikage Dono was particularly interested in our genin crop. He looked over at Kazuya. I do have to wonder why you all rejected treatment from the Kumo medics for the entirety of the exams. We had Kazuya, Naruto piped up. Don't need treatment from anyone else. The Hokage stared at Kazuya for a long moment before nodding to himself. Well, I have consulted with your Junin-sensei, and based on your reports on the first two stages and my own assessment of the tournament fights, I have come to a decision. His team held their breath as Genma grinned over their shoulders at the village leader. Naruto's head snapped to the side, and soon enough, the Hokage's assistant entered the room with three Chunin vests. Genma's chest almost burst with pride as his kids each took a vest, holding it in their hands disbelievingly. Congratulations, Team 7, the Hokage smiled. You are all now Chunin of Konoha. Yes. Thank Kami we don't have to go through those again. A cough brought their attention back. Now to discuss your Chunin assignments. Genma shifted as the three young Chunin shared confused looks. Don't we just do harder missions, Gigi? Chunin on the active roster do complete missions, Naruto-kun. But not all Chunin. You three will have assignments within the village as well as occasional missions outside of the village. The Sandaime turned to Hana. Hana-kun, your mother has already put in a request for you to train with your clan to become a veterinarian. You will also complete missions involving tracking and capture due to your skill set as an Inuzuka. Hana nodded, and Genma smiled, recalling the young Kunoichi's dream to become the best veterinarian in her clan. This would put her well on her way. Kazuya-kun, you are to be assigned to the hospital as a medic nin. From what I have heard, you have already spent several years helping the staff, so now you can be paid for your time. Genma chuckled at the quiet, heartfelt yes that the brunette hissed under his breath. Kazuya would love that. And you, Naruto-kun, will be placed on the mission assignment desk. Wait, what? Genma shared the redhead's confusion. Is there not like a sealing division that I can join or something? Naruto frowned. There is not enough shinobi competent in Fuinjutsu to form a division, the Hokage explained. It is a speciality that people rarely take on. There are many who have basic competency, but no further. I contemplated putting you with the barrier team due to your sensing capabilities, but I don't believe that would fully utilize your abilities. Naruto slumped, and Genma could sympathize at the thought of dealing with all that paperwork. However, any missions or in-village requests involving Fuinjutsu will come to you. Wait, Naruto held out a hand. What if I don't know the answer? I've only been studying for 3 years. I just study what I find interesting. What level have you reached? Asked the Hokage. I know of your explosive seals, which are at least intermediate. There are levels? A brief silence fell over the office. Naruto-kun, the Hokage asked slowly, leaning forward to rest his elbows on his desk. How have you been learning Fuinjutsu? I told you. I just learn what I find cool or useful. I have the books from Tenji-san, and I have to practice my calligraphy all the time, but a lot of the time I have an idea and I just read around until I find a way to make it. There's a lot of trial and error involved, Kazuya added helpfully. A sharp look from the Hokage prompted Genma to speak. He gets his learning materials from Tenjiro and the library. I know just enough to make sure he doesn't blow himself up, but a lot of the time he just does his own thing. Some of his seals are pretty high level as far as I'm concerned, like his ice seal from the exams. Yeah, it took me a while to get that one. I'll say. Let it die, cuz. The Hokage leaned back with a heavy sigh. Naruto-kun, what seals have you made? The redhead cocked his head in thought. Standard storage and explosive seals, although I modified both of those. Raiton seals, ice seals, 2 types of security seals, perimeter seals, paralysis seals, I suppose Suiton seals, but they technically come under storage seals. I'm working on tracking seals that would help my sensing abilities narrow down on chakra signatures from greater distances. He could go on forever, Hokage-sama. Kazuya rolled his eyes fondly. The Hokage stood and moved to take a scroll from the shelf against the wall. He unrolled it for a moment and nodded to himself, retaking his seat. Ordinarily, when one learns Fuinjutsu as a specialty, you are apprenticed to a Fuinjutsu master, and they are in charge of progressing you through the levels. We no longer have a master in Konoha with Jiraiya gone, so you were left to your own devices. I don't need a master. I've been fine on my own. Naruto crossed his arms. Indeed. The Hokage tapped the desk. There are 10 levels in Fuinjutsu, 3 basic, 4 intermediate, and 3 expert. From what you've told me, you are at intermediate level 7, although creating your own seals comes under expert level 8. I am also sure that there are going to be gaps in your education, since you appear to have jumped between levels at random depending on your interests. Wait, so Naruto is an expert? But not? Hana piped up. Naruto is definitely adept. Those who have completed the first 3 basic levels. I would even go so far to say that he could be considered a specialist, who is someone who has completed the 4 intermediate levels. But I haven't completed the levels, Naruto frowned. Genma furrowed his brow and thought. His youngest student had always been very creative when it came to Fuinjutsu. Sometimes it worked, and sometimes it ended in damage control. There had been enough supervision to make sure the kid didn't kill himself or anyone in his vicinity, but Genma trusted that Naruto knew what he was doing. He himself had only gotten to level 4 back when he was a Chunin. Naruto had surpassed him within 2 years of picking up the specialty. No, you have not, the Hokage conceded. However, I believe that you have covered enough of the material that I can give you your specialist classification to clear you for missions. Really? But I've only been studying it for 3 years. Naruto, if asked you to write out and explain a security seal to me right this moment, could you? Depends if you wanted the regular one in the library books or my own ones. The library one just gives the user a general idea that someone has entered and the direction, but doesn't give visual confirmation. Mine work as an early warning system, since it's not really effective to get the warning after the enemy enters. Focus, Naruto, Genma encouraged. Naruto was brilliant, but had a habit of going off on his own trail of thought when it came to seals. Right? Naruto nodded. I can either make you a flash or an explosive security seal. Flash lets the user know visually when someone comes within 2 meters, while the explosive blows up any shinobi whose chakra signature isn't keyed into the seal when they get in range. I also got a stealth one that is tied to the user's chakra signature that sends a pulse when foreign chakra is detected. The Hokage smiled fondly at the redhead. That's why. I can count on one hand how many shinobi in the village could respond to that question. Security seals are intermediate level 6. There are even fewer that could offer me their own seals as an alternative. Plus, it's not as if you're going to quit studying, Kazuya added. You're only going to get better. The Hokage pulled a brush and wrote something on the scroll. After a moment, he handed the scroll over to Naruto. Take that to the registry on the way out to update your classification. You will, in essence, be a one-man sealing division. So I basically have 2 assignments? The Hokage nodded. Essentially, yes. Now, Hana-kun, you are free to go. The Sandaime continued. I need to speak with Kazuya-kun and Naruto-kun about their out-of-village missions. Hana threw a look at her teammates, and they shrugged in response. Genma smiled reassuringly at her confused expression, and guided her out the room. Meet me at Training Ground 9 later, he whispered through the open door. I'll teach you guys the shunshin as promised for making chunin. Her face lit up, and Genma closed the door, turning back to his remaining team members. Now, you both have very unique skill sets that are extremely valuable to Konoha. The Hokage folded his hands on his desk. It's part of the reason why I have assigned you roles within the village. We cannot afford to send you on routine missions. Genma raised an eyebrow. This was uncommon. It did make sense, though. Kazuya was a brilliant medic with a knack for poisons, and Naruto had both natural sensing abilities and a talent for fuinjutsu. They were both so young, too. Kazuya had turned 12 in February, and Naruto was due to have his 11th birthday in 2 months. It was exciting to think of how much they could grow, how much further they could go in their fields. Instead, you will form a special unit and you will be attached to teams based on either requests or mission specifications. You will be known as Team Hari. The Chunin exchanged a glance. I also wanted to ask you to consider something, Naruto-kun. I shouldn't have to tell you all that this does not leave the room. Sure, Gigi? Naruto grinned as Genma and Kazuya nodded. I want you to help train the new Anbu recruits. Even Genma stared at the Hokage in shock. Naruto was good, but he was a fresh Chunin. With your sensing abilities, you'd be perfect for testing them on their stealth capabilities. Anbu recruits undergo their stealth assessment in April. For the duration of that month, they would try to stick a tag on you without using long-range techniques, the Hokage explained. Of course, you'd have the opportunity to memorize their chakra signatures before the month began, and you would receive a large bonus for your time. It sounds like you had all this planned out, Kazuya pointed out. Anbu normally carry out this exercise with specifically picked Junin each year, but Naruto's sensing would provide the best training for them. Okay, but they can't ambush me at home, Naruto conceded. Excellent, the Hokage smiled widely. All you need to do is call out their code names when you catch them, and hand in a report at the end of that month to the Anbu trainer. We'll discuss it in more depth closer to the time. The Hokage pushed himself up from his chair, and Genma straightened his back automatically, proud to note that his team did the same. That concludes our discussion for today. Enjoy your promotions before you start your new positions on Monday. Thanks, Gigi. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Genma shared a proud look with the Hokage as he followed his team out the door. He caught the boys before they headed off to registry. Training ground 9 later on, okay? Shunshin? He nodded and chuckled as the boys let out loud whoops of excitement, drawing stern looks from the Hokage's assistant. Genma-kun. He turned as the pair left, looking back through the open door. The Sandaime smiled warmly at him. You did an excellent job with them. I like to think that they did a good job with me, Genma grinned wryly. The Hokage nodded in understanding, and Genma left, closing the door behind him. Naruto flung himself out of his bedroom and into the kitchen, just barely avoiding knocking his arm into the kitchen cabinet to the right of his door. He loved this apartment, but sometimes he wished they could afford something a bit bigger. He had no idea how they were going to fit 3 teenage boys in here in the future. It didn't help that he had lost the Jan Kenpon between him and Kazuya when they first moved, so he got the awkward door practically in the kitchen. Ryo sluggishly shoved rice into his mouth at the kitchen table as Kazuya leaned against the counter holding out an orange. Naruto shot him an annoyed look as he grabbed the fruit. It was too early for smugness. Aren't you going to be late? Nope. Kazuya replied cheerfully. I don't need to be at the hospital until noon. It's just you that has the 7 a.m. start. Then why are you up? Ryo and I are going to go work on his katas. He starts the academy in January, so we got to make sure he's ready. It's August, Ryo whined pitifully. Why do I have to get up at 5:30 when it's months away? You'll have to get used to it. It'll be here before you know it. Naruto and Ryo shared a long-suffering look over their eldest brother. Where's your Chunin vest? Naruto stuffed half the orange into his mouth and shrugged. He didn't like it. It was too big, and the neck collar was too high, and the shoulders weighed him down, and it's not as if he needed the pockets. He just decided on his black trousers with the bandages and a plain black t-shirt. He wore his brace and headband on his left arm like usual, and his hair was thrown haphazardly into a high ponytail. It was not as if not wearing the thing would change his rank. Kazuya rolled his eyes and strode away, disappearing into the room beside Naruto's. Naruto shoved the rest of the orange into his mouth and went over to ruffle Ryo's hair, getting a tired squawk in return. He moved to the door, shoving his feet into his sandals. He swallowed the fruit and yelled behind him, "At least I'm not wearing orange." Kazuya emerged from his room and threw a lump of cloth at Naruto's head. He grabbed the fabric and threw his own confused look at his friend. "Maybe you should be." Naruto shook out the cloth and examined the jacket in shock. It had a black collar and black sleeves. It also had black lining on the long middle zip, the two lower pockets, and black ribbing on the bottom hem that matched the end of the sleeves. The rest was orange. The front panels and entire back of the jacket were a glorious burnt orange. Naruto's grin grew as he took in the small details Kazuya had added. The orange Uzumaki spiral had been sewn into the right shoulder, and a Konoha headband plate into the left, where his headband on his brace would be. The Konoha symbol had also been sewn into the front left part of the chest in black thread. He turned it over and let out a loud laugh at the large kanji sewn into the back. "You really wrote Chunin on the back?" "Didn't want people to mistake you for a genin, or worse, an academy student. You're short enough." "Thanks, Kazuya." Naruto smiled warmly, letting the short joke go. "This is amazing." He shrugged the jacket on. He had already catalogued all the places he could add storage seals. It was a bit big, but he'd grow into it. "But why?" He couldn't help but ask. "You hate it when I wear orange. You always say it clashes with my hair and I'm like a walking flare." Kazuya moved to sit at the kitchen table opposite Ryo. The blonde was staring at Naruto in awe and shot him a thumb up. "Yeah, but you love orange. At least this way, you are wearing something that looks good despite the color." Naruto could see Kazuya was trying to seem cool, but his friend had put a lot of work into this. He moved to say something else, but Kazuya continued. "Besides, aren't you going to be late?" Naruto looked at the clock to the left of the door and swore loudly, flinging himself out the front door and shouting a bye behind him. He formed his right hand into the tiger seal. Shunshin no jutsu. He reappeared on a nearby rooftop and smirked. He was going to enjoy this jutsu. He ran across the rooftops, hopping between buildings as the wind flowed through his open jacket. He leapt down and rolled to a stop in front of the academy. He stared up at the massive building. The academy, the Hokage's office, and all the administrative offices were housed here, including the mission assignment desk. Desk duty. It would be nice to be in the village near Ryo and to be able to depend on a steady paycheck. But desk duty. He entered the building and made his way to the mission assignment desk, tugging his jacket back into place. He soon entered the large room where missions were issued. He walked up to the long green desk full of chunin, the morning light shining into the room from behind through the wall-length windows. "I'm Uzumaki Naruto. I'm starting here today?" One of the chunin at the desk looked up and frowned at him. "You're Uzumaki?" Naruto nodded, and the man's frown deepened. "You look like you should be in the academy." Naruto rolled his eyes and turned, pointing a thumb at the carefully stitched chunin on his back. "Definitely supposed to be here. Passed the chunin exams a week ago and everything." The man's frown deepened, and he beckoned over his shoulder. Naruto felt a chakra signature approach and looked over to see a man walk over. He had brown hair with two long bangs that framed his face. His headband shadowed his eyes so Naruto couldn't see them, and he was dressed in a gray buttoned-up jumpsuit. "Follow me, Uzumaki." Naruto turned and followed the man away from the desk and into a door in the left side wall. They passed through a small room with a single desk to their right and a large shelf behind it. The chunin sitting there threw them a bored look as they passed. "I'm Hijiri Shimon. I'll be explaining your role here, so please try to keep up." They passed through another door and came to a large room with two long lines of desks running through the middle of the room. A massive map of the elemental nations was plastered across the far wall with notes and kunai sticking out of it. A row of brown pipes were lined up against the closest wall, opposite the map. Tall bookshelves lined the wall to his left, and windows were in the walls to the right. The room was bustling with activity, and Naruto almost felt like the room was buzzing. Hijiri led him to a desk. It was closest to the windows with his back to the pipes. "This is your desk." The man tapped the back of the chair. "Have a seat." Naruto hesitantly took a seat, hoping there was going to be more to his introduction to the department. Hijiri sat on his desk. "So the way we work is we get a mission from a client or the village itself. We assess the risks and assign a rank and subsequent value corresponding to that rank. We check the active roster to find an appropriate team for the mission. We then send out summons if necessary for those teams and brief them." Naruto nodded. It made sense so far. When those teams come back, we handle debrief and get a report on the mission. Are we clear on everything so far? Yeah. Should I be writing this down? Do it later. Now we have to work with the many departments and the administrative offices contained within the building. We work with the registry and the aviary within the communications department to find and contact appropriate shinobi for missions. We also sometimes need to contact intelligence if a mission comes in involving a country or village that we don't have much information on. Naruto tried to commit this to memory as Hijiri forged on. After the mission is where the bulk of the work is. We get intelligence on the country or village they were sent to, and we process it. If there's anything new, we pass it on to intelligence. We also have to hand the shinobi the correct payslip so they can take it to the finance department and get their mission pay. If we make a mistake, then it messes up their deductions and taxes, and they can get really annoying about it. We send them to the hospital or to psychological assessment depending on their condition, and it's up to us to send a message to the registry to update their records. In the worst-case scenario, if they don't come back, then it's up to us to flag it when they're late, and to organize a mission to find out what happened. Same if someone dies, we have to let the registry and the Hokage office know. Naruto swallowed hard at the thought. Hijiri stood and pointed to the pipes behind him. These pipes are each connected to the other departments in the building. They're not labeled, so you'll just have to ask until you memorize them. He pointed out the biggest one near the door they had entered through. It had a large box beneath it. That one is our one. We get a bunch of mail from the other departments, so check it at least every hour. Ones from the Hokage office are marked with red, so if you see that, check it immediately. Are the pipes secured? He couldn't help but ask. It seemed like there would be a lot of room for tampering there. There are security seals on them. You need to put your chakra into them to send it, and the person on the other end needs to do the same to get it. It's been tested. You can't get it out midway. Naruto nodded, and Hijiri continued, pointing at the map. That is the most current, up-to-date intelligence Konoha has on the entirety of the elemental nations. We update after every mission, and we do not classify missions without consulting it first. It was impressive map. Iwa was covered in red notes, presumably to say, stay away. How is that secured? Hijiri sent him a strange look. We secure the room. Oh, so where else you stationed? What? Hijiri gave him an amused look. No one here is just assigned to the desk. I'm also in the analysis team for half the week. I'm the sealing division, Naruto offered, scratching the back of his neck at the confused look. I thought that we didn't have one anymore. I'm now considered the sealing division. You're like 10. Yep. Hijiri appeared to think for a moment before shaking his head, muttering beneath his breath. Naruto could have sworn he heard above my pay grade. He pointed to the trays on his desk. Blue is to be classified, green is ranked and assigned, yellow is mission report, and red is to be sent to another department. We take turns being on the front desk. Good luck. Hijiri walked off and Naruto stared after him. He switched his gaze to start down at his desk and looked up as a signature approached. A Chunin placed a pile of papers on his desk. Some D ranks to start you off, she said cheerfully. She disappeared and Naruto stared in horror at the stack on his desk. He tried to recall what Hijiri had told him. He so should have written it down. Ryo bounced along the village street, looking back every 2 seconds to make sure his super slow brothers were keeping up. It was his first day at the academy. He couldn't be late. He was finally going to start his own journey to become a shinobi, just like his family. The academy isn't going anywhere, sunshine. Come on, I can't be late. Ryo grinned as the academy came into sight in the distance. Hey Ryo. His head snapped round to see Kiba running towards him down another street. Sume and Hana followed behind him at a slower pace, much like his own situation. Kiba attempted to grab him in a headlock, but Ryo danced around him, knocking his friend to the ground with a well-placed kick to the back of his knee. Dude, not cool. You started it. This is a new jumper. I'm not letting you ruin it. Kazumi and Nissan had presented it to him yesterday. It was forest green with leaves outlined in darker shades on the hem and the sleeves. Paired with his clean black shorts and sandals, Ryo was ready to impress everyone there. Kazumi had even sewn the Uzumaki clan symbol into the upper back of the jumper, just like the other clans. Hi guys. Hey Hana. Boys. Tsume-san. Tsume-san. Ryo rolled his eyes and dragged his best friend up from the ground. They continued towards the academy and soon enough they came upon a crowd of people. Ryo looked through the kids and ducked behind Kiba as he spotted the awful blonde girl that always came and yelled at them in the park. Hey, there's Shikamaru and Choji. The other two boys wandered over, two grown-up versions of them following behind. This is such a drag, Shikamaru groaned. Why do they have to start school so early in the morning? Choji offered him an open packet of crisps. Shikamaru shook his head and Choji shrugged, offering it to Ryo. Ryo took him up on it, munching away as the adults joined them. You kids ready for the academy? Choji's dad asked merrily. No. Hell yeah. Yep, Ryo added his own answer to his friend's replies. Ryo hasn't stopped talking about it for the past month. Ryo looked back in betrayal at Kazumi as Nissan chuckled beside him. We've heard about Uzumaki Ryo from our sons, nodded Shikamaru's dad. Only good things. That's strange. Nissan ruffled his hair, and Ryo shoved the hand away in embarrassment. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, and this is Arai Kazuya. We're his brothers. Nice to meet you, Nara-san, Akimichi-san. No need to be formal with these guys, brats. How are you, Tsume? Shikamaru's dad grinned. Kiba's mother grinned back. Ready to get rid of my youngest. Kachan! A bell rang out from the entrance of the academy. Right, time to go. Kazumi clapped his hands and began shooing Ryo and his friends towards the door. Nissan continued talking with his friends' parents, but Ryo lost track of what they were saying as they were swallowed up by the crowd of kids entering the school. He shared a grin with Kiba as they took their first step towards becoming shinobi. Hana waited by the entrance of the dango shop, tapping her foot. Of course they were late. Naruto was tumbling out the door every day of his life, while Kazuya had a tendency to get distracted and forget time was a thing. It had been 7 months since they had fought in the tournament finals, but it was still strange not to see them every day. It was great training with her clan to finally qualify as a veterinarian, but she did miss her two idiots. Even if she did see them for team dinner every month. It was a special day today, though, the 3rd of February. Hey, Hana. Naruto came running up, Kazuya in tow. She smiled as she shook her head. She pulled Kazuya into a tight hug as they came into range. Happy birthday, Kaz! She pulled back and grinned at him. Welcome to teenagehood. Thanks, he smiled back. They pulled apart and entered the dango shop. It was not only Kazuya's favorite, but to her knowledge it was the only one that hadn't banned the pair. She had no idea why half the shops in Konoha had a grudge against them and Ryo, but it was ridiculous. She made it a point to avoid them, and her mum did the same. They ordered and Hana dumped Kazuya's gift on the table. As Kazuya examined the package, Hana turned to Naruto. So Genma-sensei's on a mission, huh? Yup, but he's paying for the dango. Nice. What's this? She looked over to see Kazuya staring at the scrolls she had given to him. She had been looking for something for Kazuya at the bookstore, and when she had spotted them, it had been perfect. It had nothing to do with any of his training or his job at the hospital. They're star charts, she explained. I figured you need a hobby outside of poison and medical studies, but you'd get bored with anything easy, so... Stars. You can learn them and the constellations. Could even use it for navigation at night. This is amazing, Hana, Kazuya said in awe. I would never have picked this out for myself. She slumped slightly in relief. She had believed that he would like it, but it really wasn't something he had been given before. That's really cool. Naruto peered over Kazuya's shoulder to look at the scroll. What'd you get him? Hana asked, leaning back as their order were placed on the table. I can only imagine what seals you came up with for him this year. Medical ones. Hana shot a look at Kazuya as he placed the star charts carefully in a storage scroll. Yeah, you know his lightning seals? He engineered them to work as defibrillators. Hana gaped at their youngest member as he shrugged. I was already zapping them, this is just zapping them with purpose. Everyone at the hospital is going slightly nuts. So how's Kiba doing? Ryo's finally realized that the academy isn't everything he expected. Naruto grinned, as if remembering their own first day. Kiba is the same, she laughed. It's hilarious seeing it now I'm older. Do you think we were like that? Almost definitely. Kazuya joined in on her laughter. Come on guys, it's only been a month, they have a long way to go yet. I seem to recall you bursting into Hokage-sama's office after your first day announcing that the academy sucked, Aka-chan. Well, I wasn't wrong. Hana ate a dumpling off her skewer, savoring the sweet taste as it melted on her tongue. I don't think they were expecting this much studying, Naruto shrugged. They probably wanted more fighting and stabbing and fancy jutsu. I know I did in first year. We all did, which is why we didn't stay in first year. Kazuya pointed his skewer at the redhead. They don't have that option. They just have to suffer. Hana coughed, choking on her bite of dango as she muffled her laughter. The boys turned to stare at her and she swallowed with a struggle. Kiba and Ryo doing maths. At her words, her teammates burst out into laughter. Oh man, those poor suckers, Naruto giggled. I guess it's going to fall to me to shove that into their skulls like I did with you guys, huh? Come on, Kazuya, Hana grinned. Not like we didn't shove stuff into your brain in return. Speaking of, weren't we supposed to leave all that boring paperwork stuff back in the academy? Naruto's grin dropped into a pout. It's like Gigi wants me to suffer through the years in the academy I missed. Don't you voluntarily study fuinjutsu though? Hana asked, confused. That's like the most book-heavy, study-intensive discipline you can do as a shinobi except medical ninjutsu. Yeah, but that's fuinjutsu, he replied as if that explained everything. That's not work. So it's busy up at the desk then? Kazuya smirked. Naruto groaned, his head thumping as it dropped onto the table. There's just so much to remember and I have to talk to so many different departments and there are so many forms. Doesn't help that the person closest to my age is still like 10 years older than me. You'll be fine, Hana smiled at him. Kazuya patted Naruto's head, drawing a glare from the younger boy. There, Aka-chan. Just because it's your birthday doesn't mean I won't maim you. Kazuya rolled his eyes, turning to share an amused glance with Hana. Kids, am I right? I'm 11, Team A. You were fucking 12 yesterday. I'm 14 in April. Hana added, stifling a laugh at Naruto's betrayed expression. Is this what people mean when they complain about their kids becoming teenagers? He huffed. Hana and Kazuya sniggered at their friend. Naruto couldn't hold his pout and soon joined them, their mirth echoing throughout the shop. The Anbu watched the boy from a distance, as he left the library with a different set of scrolls than when he had entered 2 hours ago. This had to be a joke. This couldn't be their stealth training for Anbu. Their Anbu trainer had been completely serious when he had given them the assignment 3 days ago, but when he had briefed them, it had sounded so reasonable. Attach a tag to Uzumaki Naruto only using stealth or covert techniques. No mid or long-range jutsu, and no ambushing the kid at his flat. They had the entire month of April and 1 attempt a day. As Tora stared at the boy from the rooftop, though, he couldn't help but think that maybe they were getting a bit soft with the Anbu training. Although they had oddly made it a point to emphasize this was an exercise in stealth and ambush, not speed and overwhelming the opponent with pure strength. The kid was around 10, with long bright red hair and a black and orange jacket. He stuck out like a sore thumb. He had heard that the youngest Jinin team had made Chunin in the exams last July, but the kid didn't even come up to his elbow. He would have understood if it was someone like Weasel. The Uchiha may have only been 13, but he had recently been promoted to Anbu captain. That kid was an incredible shinobi. This one wore orange. He watched the young Chunin weave through the market without a care in the world, and Tora followed. There were 5 Anbu trainees this year, and Tora knew they were also watching the kid from around the village. It would just be a matter who tried first. They had just been watching the kid for the past 3 days, waiting for the other sandal to drop, but it appeared that there was no hidden trap in the task. He moved closer, so he was nestled on the rooftop, adjacent to the fruit stall that Uzumaki had stopped beside. He could just ambush the kid. There was no way he would know that he was coming. He was an Anbu, the kid was a Chunin. The difference in their abilities would be too wide for Uzumaki to mount a defense. He could also just pass him with a henge and tag him as he passed. The kid wouldn't be able to detect it. "Tora, you've been caught!" Tora jolted and flung his head over the side of the roof to look down at the ground. Uzumaki was staring up at him with a wide grin. He turned, waving a hand over his shoulder. "Better luck tomorrow." Tora sat back and watched the Chunin walk away. How had the boy known he was there? There were Junin that wouldn't have known he was there. He might need to rethink this. Kazuya shrugged on his brown waistcoat as he made his way to the hospital reception to meet up with Naruto. He'd finished up with his morning shift, and since his friend had the afternoon free, they had decided to go train. Just because they were mainly stuck in the village didn't mean they could afford to slack off on their training. He came to the desk and waved to the receptionist, Sarah, as she smiled back at him. His grin dropped as he spotted the man loitering around the entrance. The man looked up at him and his glower twisted into a pleased snarl. "Kazuya!" Kazuya couldn't help but take an involuntary step back. He looked exactly the same, greasy, short brown hair, dark eyes, an overhanging gut from years of flinging back too much beer, his dirty builder's uniform. He could already smell the stale sweat and alcohol, and it was like he was 6 years old again. "You think since you became a fancy ninja that you're too good to speak to your uncle? Huh?" Kazuya looked towards the entrance, but his feet wouldn't move. "After everything I did for you after Yua died, I fed you, put a roof over your head, and the minute you have the cash to pay me back, you fucking vanish. For 3 years. Out on your fancy ninja missions, no doubt." His uncle strode towards him, and Kazuya hunched his shoulders instinctively, his stomach clenching and heart thudding in his chest. "You owe me, boy." His uncle was stopped from advancing any further as someone's hand wrapped around his arm. Kazuya and his uncle looked to see an angry redhead boring a hole into the man's skull. "He owes you nothing, Arai Zankoku." "Fuck off, kid." His uncle snapped Naruto's hand off angrily. "This is none of your fucking business. This is between me and my nephew. Actually, it is my fucking business." Naruto shoved himself in front of Kazuya. "Kazuya is a part of my family now, so you have something to say to him. You say it to me." Zankoku looked between Naruto and Kazuya, sneering. "Replaced me, huh? It's only a matter of time before he realizes you're more trouble than you're worth." Kazuya swallowed the lump in his throat. "Are you actually here for something, or just here to be a public nuisance? Because I can call security." His uncle's eyes snapped back to the redhead. "Kazuya owes me. I paid for his food, clothes, roof over his head. Now he's got a wage. I want that debt repaid. Of course, because it's been 3 years, the interest has built up a fair bit." Kazuya looked away from that familiar cruel smirk. Bullshit. Both Kazuya and his uncle snapped their heads to stare at Naruto in shock. "He owes you nothing." Sakoku opened his mouth to argue, but Naruto continued. "Arai Yua had funds and assets left behind after she died, and according to the will she left it was all to go to Kazuya." Kazuya's mouth dropped open. He'd heard nothing about this. He had just been told that everything had been lost after the Kyuubi attack. The will was destroyed in the attack. Zankoku actually looked uncomfortable. There's no way to know what was in it. "You'd think that, but I had an interesting conversation with the civilian department in the administrative offices. Turns out, a copy is kept in their legal division, just in case disputes like this occur." Kazuya watched numbly as his uncle's face drained of color. "Kazuya owes you nothing, because you've already taken money that's rightfully his. It'll be up to him what legal action he wants to take." His uncle's eyes darted to him, but Kazuya was looking at Naruto. His friend was gazing steadily at him. It was like he was saying no matter what Kazuya chose to do, Naruto would be there for him. The knot that had been choking him since his uncle had appeared loosened, and Kazuya turned to look his uncle square in the eyes. "I want nothing," he said, taking a deep breath, the knot still twisting in his gut. I want nothing to do with you. I want you to leave me alone and never talk to me again. Zankoku opened and closed his mouth for a few moments in shock. Naruto took a step forward threateningly, and the man staggered back, swearing. Fucking fine then, he spat. Don't fucking need anything from you anyway. Just don't come crawling back to me when that brat figures out he's better off without you. His uncle stumbled out of the hospital entrance, and Kazuya took a moment to stare, before he turned to his best friend. Naruto was glaring at the door, a disgusted look on his face. Why didn't you tell me you were looking into my mother's will? The disgust drained, and Naruto scratched the back of his neck sheepishly. It was just an idea I had. I have to speak to so many departments at the desk, and one day I had to deal with the civilian department. One thing led to another, and I ended up finding about the spare copies of civilian wills, and figured I could see if you had been left anything by your mum. Kazuya opened his mouth to speak, but Naruto continued. I have to be honest though. They only keep them for up to 5 years. Everything I just said to your uncle was a bluff backed by educated guesses. Kazuya processed his words and pulled his best friend into a tight hug. He closed his eyes and soaked up his friend's warmth for a moment before letting go. Thanks, Naruto. Hey Kazuya, are you alright? He looked back to see Sara coming up to them, concern written all over her face. I'm fine, Sara. Well, I've given his name and description to security so he won't get near this building again. She nodded to herself and squeezed his arm, going back to her desk. The final vestiges of discomfort and turmoil left his body, and Kazuya flung an arm around Naruto. Come on, let's go blow some shit up. He was so lucky to have these people in his life. Shunshin no Jutsu. Body Flicker Technique. Chapter 18. The saddest thing about betrayal is that it never comes from your enemies. Naruto dropped his head onto the table and let out a loud groan. Kazuya, the traitor, let out a laugh from his place on the sofa, and Naruto shot over a glare that the brunette couldn't see. If you had done it when I told you to, you wouldn't be suffering like this. Naruto just let out a louder groan. Why are there no classes in the academy on how to do taxes? Why do we do much pointless maths yet when we actually need it? You know, even if there were, we skipped so much of the academy that we probably would have missed them anyway. Shut the fuck up. Naruto glared down at the tax forms. Life had been so much easier as a genin. As a genin, tax is automatically deducted from your mission pay, so you never have to worry about it. Same with active mission Chunin and Junin. Whenever he did missions as Team Hari, his mission pay also followed this system. Desk Chunin, however, due to the fact they are paid by the hour, and often work in multiple departments, have to fill out a form per department and get proof of hours worked from the registry. This all gets handed in to the finance department, who work out the tax threshold for the coming year, based on what was worked that year. Since he didn't have to do that last year, his tax threshold was low this year as it was set at the minimum, but he had a bad feeling it was about to go way up. He even had to fill in another form for the bulk payment he got in April for the Anbu training. We have to leave soon. I know, Naruto snapped back, filling in some of the pages. It's easy for you. You literally only have the hospital to worry about. I have 3 sources of income. You knew these were due at the end of June. Naruto rolled his eyes as he scribbled his signature down. The tax year in Konoha was June due to the Chunin and Junin exams taking place in July. This set up the village finances in preparation for the promotions from those exams. He quirked his head to side as he felt Ryo's signature come into range. Ryo's on his way. Nice, Kazuya jumped up. I'll handle the ambush. You finish those forms. As his friend got the bucket and walked up the wall to stand above the entrance, Naruto scrawled some last signatures down. He put his brush down and took a moment to scan the forms. They looked right, but he wouldn't know for sure until the finance department sent them back covered in red ink. He shrugged and rolled them up, standing and shoving them into his pocket, as Ryo's signature reached the front door. The door swung and Naruto grinned as Kazuya dumped the bucket of glitter over their youngest brother, the blonde letting out a loud shriek. Naruto doubled over in laughter as Ryo stood in the doorway, frozen in shock. Kazuya joined him, and Naruto wheezed as his friend lost control of his chakra, thumping onto the floor. Ryo glared at the pair of them, his arms held out to the side as he was surrounded by heaps of glitter. Kazumi? Why? Naruto gasped for breath as Kazuya struggled up from where he had fallen, still giggling. Just because you've started the academy doesn't mean we can slack on the training, Kazuya grinned. A good shinobi always has to be aware of his surroundings. Yeah, Naruto wheezed, clutching his side as a stitch started up. You need to be able to dodge that. The sight of Ryo folding his arms and pouting, still covering in bright gold glitter, set them off again. This is not what I meant by training, Ryo scowled. Yet it will prove invaluable. Kazuya finally dragged himself up from the floor and patted Ryo's hair lightly. Now, make sure it's all cleaned up by the time we get back from our mission. I've made a bunch of meals for you in the freezer, and you can go to the Inuzuka for anything else. He dodged around the swipe from the angry academy student, and Naru took that as his cue to grab his packed bag from beside the fridge. He threw Kazuya's to him as the older boy darted to the window. You can't expect me to clean this up by myself. Love you, sunshine, Naruto called behind him as he reached the window. Study hard, Hana's in the village if you need anything. Stay safe and out of trouble. He followed Kazuya out the window, to the sounds of Ryo's outrage. First, the finance department, then the front gates to meet the other member of their team. Naruto closed his eyes, walking forward slowly. He waited patiently until he finally felt the foreign chakra beginning to enter his system. Now, he opened his eyes and looked to Kurenai. She smiled and nodded, dispersing the genjutsu. You're getting really good at that. You really are, Kazuya agreed, walking beside the female chunin. There's almost no delay between her casting the genjutsu and you sensing it now. Naruto grinned and skipped along the dirt track to Konoha. Yuhi Kurenai was a tall, dark-haired woman who at the start of the mission had seemed very unsure about them. It had quickly become apparent that it was due to their age, but after liberating a town in the deep south of Fire Country, between just the three of them, she had reevaluated. Naruto liked to think that his sensing and Kazuya's healing of the town's entire infirmary had played a part in that. They had also learned a bit about her as well. Turns out, she was a genjutsu mistress. The first stage of the Chunin exam still stuck in Naruto's mind, and he knew he had to get better at detecting chakra entering his system, no matter how subtle or how much was going on. He wasn't about to let this opportunity pass, so he had managed to convince her to cast genjutsu on him on the way back. She had seemed a bit confused, but caught on quickly, after the first couple illusions. Now, if you could do that in the middle of battle, you'd be sorted. The fact you can do it at all is amazing. Kurenai smiled, raising her eyebrow at Kazuya. There are not many shinobi who can detect my chakra during a genjutsu. The village gates came into view, and something in Naruto relaxed at the sight. It had been a long month away, and Naruto was more than ready to sit down with a bowl of ramen with Ryo, even if it was a bit late. He wondered if he'd been able to get the glitter out of everything. The Academy Chunin had been finding it in their staff room for weeks when they dumped it in there. They handed in their papers to Izumo and Kotetsu at the gate, and waved to Kurenai as she headed off in the opposite direction. Naruto hoped they had more missions with her in the future. She was cool. They would meet up to hand in their mission reports first thing tomorrow morning, using tonight to write them up. Naruto was already cataloging the new information that would be added to the giant map in the office. He and Kazuya walked along the village streets, the dark, cloudy sky casting an uncharacteristic gloom over the village. Naruto stretched out his sensing ability to track down Ryo, but stopped as he came across a gaping void, with more lights flickering out even as he stood there. Kazuya, you need to get the Ambu to the Uchiha compound. There's a team south-southwest of here, on top of the kimono shop. Wait, why? His friend was cut off as Naruto shot forward, pushing chakra to his feet as he flung himself to the rooftops. Someone's killing the Uchiha, he screamed behind him as a group of Kiba-sized chakra signatures were snuffed out. The wind tore at his face as he ran across the village, desperation fueling him as the signatures dwindled. He finally reached the edge of the compound. The normally proud flags bearing the Uchiha fans hanging limply in tatters. He threw himself through the entrance and swallowed harshly at the scattered bodies lying discarded around the street. Smoke rose from some of the homes, and Naruto had to choke back the bile that rose up. He shook his head harshly and ran towards the only signatures he could feel. There were two, and both were uchiha. There was another large uchiha one in the distance near the police station, but he didn't have time to go there. He had to focus on the majority he could save. He strained to feel for any foreign signatures, but could feel none. No indication of what had done this to the proud Uchiha clan. He pushed himself harder as the larger signature lunged for the smaller one. He finally saw Itachi shove a kid out of a house, and Naruto dove forward, grabbing the kid as Itachi swiped a kunai at the empty air. Naruto looked down to see a shocked and tearful Sasuke. He shoved the kid's head into his shoulder as he stood so he wouldn't look round to see the bodies still scattered throughout the street. "Don't look, Sasuke," he muttered beneath his breath. "Help's on its way." The kid was shaking. He complied, but Naruto knew it was more likely he hadn't heard him and was still in shock. "Do not interfere, Uzumaki." Naruto looked back up with burning eyes. "What the fuck have you done, Itachi?" The older Uchiha was still dressed in his Anbu uniform sans his mask. There wasn't even any blood splatter on his uniform to indicate what he had just done. His dark eyes were blank, and Naruto didn't know if that made this all worse. "I have proven myself." Itachi threw out his hands to gesture to the destruction around him. "But I must speak to Sasuke alone. You are standing in the way of this. If you think for a single second I'm going to let you near this child after what you just did to his family, you are insane," Naruto hissed, holding Sasuke tighter to him. "I killed the Uchiha clan to prove my power," Itachi proclaimed, pointing a kunai at them. "Sasuke is the only one left that has the potential to be my opponent." Sasuke began to stir as Itachi continued. "But right now he is too weak." Naruto looked down at the boy in his arms and made a decision. He chopped the back of Sasuke's neck, and the boy became a dead weight as he dropped into unconsciousness. He hefted the youngest Uchiha further up into his shoulder. "What did you do?" Itachi took a menacing step forward, showing his first emotion since Naruto arrived. "I'm not gonna let you sprout whatever shit you were going to come up with to hurt this kid further." Naruto took a step back as he mentally screamed for that Anbu team. "He's gone through enough. He doesn't owe you anything." Naruto dropped his gaze as he felt something shift in Itachi's chakra. There was no way he would win against Itachi in a straight fight. He had to protect Sasuke, and if Itachi had his Sharingan activated, then Naruto couldn't even meet his eyes. Naruto was just a Chunin. Itachi was an Anbu captain. He just had to last long enough for Kazuya to get that Anbu team. Itachi said he had killed the Uchiha clan, but the signature he had sensed near the disappearing lights hadn't been Itachi's. He hadn't been here for the whole massacre, so Itachi must have killed the others before he came into range. "Why would you risk yourself for a stranger like this? You know I could cut you down where you stand?" Naruto still refused to meet Itachi's eyes. No one deserves this, especially not Makoto's kid. There was flicker in Itachi's chakra at the mention of his mother before Naruto spoke up again. "Why, Itachi? It can't just be about power." The puzzle pieces just didn't fit in Naruto's brain. If it was, then why the civilians? Why the kids? "I did this to prove my power. The clan has become weak. I have proved that this night." Naruto couldn't help but feel that Itachi didn't really believe that. "Sasuke has to be the one to kill me. That'll be his choice," Naruto shot back venomously. He finally sensed the Anbu team reaching the edge of the compound. He sensed Itachi building up his chakra for something and mentally sent an apology to Sasuke. It was either Itachi's capture or their lives. "An Anbu team is on their way. You can either fight me and get caught by them, or flee now and leave Sasuke alone." Itachi hesitated and Naruto took a chance. "Your accomplice has already fled the police station." "I did this alone. We both know you didn't." "You're working with another Uchiha." Itachi fell silent, and Naruto felt relief as he sensed Kakashi with the Anbu team. He jolted back at movement from Itachi. "Your sensing abilities are as great as they are dangerous, for both your opponents and yourself." Naruto almost wanted to ask what he meant by that, but Itachi vanished. his chakra signature reappeared far from them, and Naruto lost track as it left the village. Naruto sank to the floor, still clutching Sasuke, as the adrenaline coursed through him. He let out a shaky breath as he finally loosened his grip on the kid. Sasuke looked so different to the tiny child that he had given a tomato to in the market. His ashen face was streaked with tears, and even in sleep, his face was lined with pain and sorrow. Naruto dreaded the kid waking up. The world he would awaken to would not be kind to him. He looked over to the house that Sasuke had been shoved out of, and he swallowed a hard lump. Mikoto was dead. He looked around at the bodies, and the sense of wrong pushed down on his shoulders. The Uchiha clan was dead. There should be so many chakra signatures around him. He should have been overwhelmed by the number of people. So many people dead, just like that, by someone who should have loved and protected them. Who was that other Uchiha, though? Naruto had never felt his signature before. From what he'd been able to sense in his peripherals, the other Uchiha had been the one to take out the police station. Then, why had Itachi insisted that he had done it alone? Was he covering for someone? There was something that didn't sit right about any of this, but it was hard to think about it when surrounded by the dead family members of the boy in his arms. He squeezed his eyes shut as tears began to fall. Maybe, if he had been quicker, he would have been able to save more of them. He didn't hear the Ambu team land near him, but he felt their signatures. Kakashi approached and knelt next to him, placing a careful hand on his shoulder. Naruto looked up through blurry eyes to see the impassive dog mask of the Ambu staring back. Any other survivors? Naruto shook his head and looked back down at Sasuke's face. The Ambu team moved around him as Kakashi remained next to him. Who did this? Itachi, Naruto managed to choke out. And another Uchiha, not from the village. Kakashi squeezed his shoulder and rose, leaving Naruto sat in the middle of the Uchiha's cobbled streets, clutching the last Uchiha in his arms. Hiruzen rubbed his eyes as his headache persisted. What a mess. The Uchiha clan was gone, and it was due to one of his own former council members. Hiruzen was not sure the last time he had felt such fury as when young Itachi had come to report on the Uchiha clan's death. It had been a bit later, as the Uchiha had had to avoid Naruto-kun's sensing, which was another issue that had to be dealt with. There was nothing to be done after the fact. The Uchiha clan was gone, and Hiruzen could not bring them back. He could only promise Itachi to keep the cover story that the boy alone had been responsible for the massacre and to keep Sasuke away from Danzo. He could also remove Danzo from the council, dismantle Root, and prevent him from being in a position to make this sort of decision ever again. Hiruzen had grown soft in his old age, depending on his counsel perhaps too much. That was going to change. Now, Itachi had suggested he join an organization called Akatsuki, to not only reinforce his image as a criminal, but to spy on them for Konoha. Hiruzen was more than aware that he did not deserve the loyalty of a shinobi like Itachi, but he was grateful for it nonetheless. The Uchiha had also warned him of Naruto. The redhead had somehow found himself in the middle of all this, and had reported to Team Ro that there had been a second Uchiha present. Itachi had reported that it had been another member of the Akatsuki, but had not been able to inform Hiruzen of his identity. It was troubling, but there were far larger concerns to address right now. A knock from his door, but before Hiruzen had a chance to answer, Naruto burst in, Hiruzen's harried secretary following behind. He waved the poor woman off and took the boy in. Naruto was now 11, Hiruzen believed, only 2 years younger than Itachi. He was still dressed in his customary mission gear, and Hiruzen absent-mindedly noted that the boy was to hand in a report in just a few hours. Some of his long red hair had escaped its braid and stuck haphazardly in all directions. The scar on his face was fading, although it now stuck out against pale, sickly skin. Despite the tears dried on his face, Naruto's blue eyes shone with determination. Hiruzen couldn't help but think he looked more and more like Minato with each passing year. Naruto-kun, I understand this has been a trying night, Hiruzen began, watching Naruto's hands curl into fists. Thank you for your swift actions in saving Uchiha Sasuke, but it is now being handled. Itachi wouldn't have killed him. Naruto frowned, coming to stand in front of Hiruzen's desk. I didn't save anybody. Hiruzen grimaced. The boy was taking this harder than he thought. I want to talk to you about what's happening to Sasuke now. There is currently a retrieval and identification mission underway to compile a list of the dead, Hiruzen sighed. Once this is done, a funeral will be held, and all assets and powers of the Uchiha clan will transfer to Sasuke. He will not be able to take the clan head seat until he reaches Chunin, so the status of the Uchiha clan has been suspended until that time. I don't care about all that power bullshit, Naruto snapped. I want to know what is going to happen to the 8-year-old child in the hospital right now. There are many families in Konoha who would petition to take Sasuke-kun in, Hiruzen started, but Naruto cut him off. They are all fucking vultures. They don't care about Sasuke, they'll just want the last Uchiha. The redhead spat out the last phrase with disgust. Either way, Hiruzen continued, Sasuke won't be going to anyone. He also won't be going to the orphanage. His status as the last Uchiha would make him going to any one family too disruptive to the power balance within the village. He will be living on his own. This statement almost seemed to horrify Naruto more than the power-hungry families. Gigi, he can't live on his own. Hiruzen sighed. He must. There are no living family members and no one can take him in. Why can't he live with me? Naruto-kun, you cannot get preferential treatment. You hardly know the boy. I know tonight has hit you hard, but I'm afraid Sasuke has to fend for himself. He has the wealth and resources of the Uchiha clan behind him. He'll be okay. He just lost his whole family. Money won't mean anything to him. Naruto mouth wobbled. I owe his mother. I can't just let him survive on his own. Hiruzen leveled his gaze at the boy. What about moving him in next door to me? Into 9B? There's no way in fuck he would be moving back into the Uchiha compound, so he'd have to find somewhere anyway, right? What happened to the couple living next to you? Apparently we're not very good neighbors, Naruto shrugged. Noise complaints and stuff, but if Sasuke moves in there, Kaz and I can check on him, make sure he eats, has clean clothes, pays his bills. Hiruzen considered his proposal. Technically, the Uchiha would be living on his own. He would just have friendly neighbors. He also had a feeling that no matter where Sasuke was moved to, Naruto would track him down and look after him anyway. That should be acceptable. However, you must be prepared to accept that Sasuke might not want your help. Naruto nodded. I know, but I have to try. And Naruto? Everything you saw and felt tonight, including the intruder, is now an S-rank secret, Hiruzen ordered. No one must know that Itachi did not act alone. You must stick to the story that Itachi told you. He did it alone and for power. Do you understand? Wait, what? Naruto stared at him in confusion. But he didn't. The other Uchiha was the one to take out the police force. I'm also pretty sure he took out some of the kids too, but I could be wrong, as I had only just arrived back in the village then. I have no idea what the ratio was for the massacre, but it wasn't all Itachi. Regardless, you cannot tell anyone about this other Uchiha. Hiruzen tried to make it clear, but Naruto continued. And why now? Why tonight? Plus his motive is sketchy at best. He did it for power. He said that the clan had weakened, but I give out missions and they haven't. There has just been a decline in trust between the village and the clan over recent years. Not only that, but in terms of power, the civilians and the kids shouldn't have come into it. Naruto. The boy shut his mouth and gaped back at Hiruzen. You are a Chunin barely out of your first year. You do not have the authorization to take this matter any further than I allow you to. Hiruzen snapped. I know I have been lenient with you, but in this matter, you will follow your Hokage's orders. You will tell no one of the true events of tonight. You will tell anyone who asks that it was Itachi alone and he did it for the sake of power. You will not pry it any further. Is that clear? What about Sasuke? Naruto asked stubbornly. He deserves to know the truth. No one. Clear. Yes, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen nodded his head curtly at the redhead, relieved to finally get this through his skull. It was to protect him. The less he knew about this the better, and he already knew too much as it was. The boy would forgive him. Naruto was well practiced in the art of keeping S-rank secrets. Genma stood beside Raito as the shinobi around them murmured between themselves. It was the very early morning, and he tried to suppress a yawn, resting his head on Raito's warm shoulder. Hey, do we know what this is about? Anko and Kurenai slipped in next to them, peering over the people in front of them to see the Hokage's empty desk. Genma shook his head as a yawn finally escaped. Nope, but it must be something big if it was this last minute. Kurenai let out a yawn of her own, and Genma peered sleepily over at her. Late night? Just got back late last night from a mission with your boys? She stretched her hands above her head. We're handing in our mission report in a couple hours. I wonder where the uchiha are, Raito commented. If the meeting is that important, some of the police force should be here. Genma lifted his head to look around. His friend had a point. There was not a single uchiha in sight. Usually, they were all over this kind of thing. The Hokage entered through a side door, and the shinobi in the room collectively stood to attention. Genma narrowed his eyes as Naruto snuck in after the Hokage. As their village leader stood in front of his desk, Naruto stood to his right and behind the desk. Naruto didn't look good. He obviously hadn't gotten changed from his mission the previous night, and his hair was in a state. His face was pale, and he appeared not to have slept. Dread pooled in Genma's gut as the Hokage began to speak. The village will never be the same. Raito spoke up, and Genma smiled half-heartedly at him. Naruto took a deep breath and pushed away from Genma. He roughly wiped his eyes and sighed. I've got to go. I have to get a shower before going back to the office. Naruto, maybe you should take the day off, Genma tried to gently suggest. This isn't something you can just brush off. Everyone is going to take it hard, and they weren't there to see it. I don't have time, Naruto shook his head. It's all hands on deck. We have to go to the police station and organize the rotas and, oh no, the registry, finance, all those departments will have to be updated and normal missions have keep going too. Breathe, Naruto-kun. Naruto grimaced in an attempt at a smile towards Raito. Thanks, Genma-sensei, Raito-san. I'll see you when you come to get your rotas. Naruto shined away, and Genma sighed, staring at the spot his student had disappeared. The sun began to peek over the village, shining a cold orange light through the quiet streets. The village already seemed emptier. Sasuke stood in the empty flat, keys dangling from his limp hands. He'd finally been released from the hospital an hour ago, and the Hokage had told him he would be moving in here. It had been 2 days since that night, and the memories were still fresh in Sasuke's mind. He let go of the keys, and they dropped to the varnished wooden floor with an echoing clank. He couldn't bear to be in here anymore. He went for the window and slammed it open. He climbed out and made his way to the roof. Finally reaching the top, he sat there, the cool evening air moving through his thin t-shirt. His clan was gone. His family was gone. If he went to the compound right now, there would be no one there to greet him, no one there to smile at him, wish him a good night. His mother wouldn't be there to tell him off for being late. His father wouldn't be sitting in his office. They never would be again. He was totally alone, and it was all because of Itachi. Turmoil churned in his gut at the thought of his brother. When he'd entered their home to find his brother standing over his parents' bodies, his brain had frozen. There had been no thoughts, no comprehension, no understanding. He just couldn't wrap his head around the fact that his big brother could have done something like that. Then Itachi had lunged for him, and Sasuke's brain had remained frozen, still unable to react. Someone else had arrived then, and Sasuke couldn't remember what happened after that. He must have blacked out because he'd woken up in the hospital sometime later. Some guy with pink eyes had been there to check him over. The Hokage had arrived much later to tell him what had happened. The Hokage said that Itachi had done it to prove his power, that Itachi had been the one to kill Shisui last year. The village will never be the same. Raito spoke up, and Genma smiled half-heartedly at him. Naruto took a deep breath and pushed away from Genma. He roughly wiped his eyes and sighed. I've got to go. I have to get a shower before going back to the office. Naruto, maybe you should take the day off, Genma tried to gently suggest. This isn't something you can just brush off. Everyone is going to take it hard, and they weren't there to see it. I don't have time, Naruto shook his head. It's all hands on deck. We have to go to the police station and organize the rotas and, oh no, the registry, finance, all those departments will have to be updated and normal missions have keep going too. Breathe, Naruto-kun. Naruto grimaced in an attempt at a smile towards Raito. Thanks, Genma-sensei. Raito-san. I'll see you when you come to get your rotas. Naruto shined away, and Genma sighed, staring at the spot his student had disappeared. The sun began to peek over the village, shining a cold orange light through the quiet streets. The village already seemed emptier. Sasuke stood in the empty flat, keys dangling from his limp hands. He'd finally been released from the hospital an hour ago, and the Hokage had told him he would be moving in here. It had been 2 days since that night, and the memories were still fresh in Sasuke's mind. He let go of the keys, and they dropped to the varnished wooden floor with an echoing clank. He couldn't bear to be in here anymore. He went for the window and slammed it open. He climbed out and made his way to the roof. Finally reaching the top, he sat there, the cool evening air moving through his thin t-shirt. His clan was gone. His family was gone. If he went to the compound right now, there would be no one there to greet him, no one there to smile at him, wish him a good night. His mother wouldn't be there to tell him off for being late. His father wouldn't be sitting in his office. They never would be again. He was totally alone, and it was all because of Itachi. Turmoil churned in his gut at the thought of his brother. When he'd entered their home to find his brother standing over his parents' bodies, his brain had frozen. There had been no thoughts, no comprehension, no understanding. He just couldn't wrap his head around the fact that his big brother could have done something like that. Then Itachi had lunged for him, and Sasuke's brain had remained frozen, still unable to react. Someone else had arrived then, and Sasuke couldn't remember what happened after that. He must have blacked out because he'd woken up in the hospital sometime later. Some guy with pink eyes had been there to check him over. The Hokage had arrived much later to tell him what had happened. The Hokage said that Itachi had done it to prove his power, that Itachi had been the one to kill Shisui last year. The memory of his brother lunging for him with a kunai made it easier to believe, but it didn't fit with the Itachi that Sasuke knew. But did Sasuke even know Itachi anymore? Itachi had been so busy with Anbu and his missions that Sasuke had barely seen him in recent years. Who knows what his brother had been up to in that time? Sasuke was still alone. He still had no family, no clan, no home, and it was all because of Itachi. Room up there for one more? He flinched as a head popped up over the edge of the roof. The older boy smiled at him as he clambered onto the roof, his orange jacket flowing with the night breeze. His long red hair hung loose around his shoulders, and a large scar marred the left side of his face. The boy dumped a blanket onto Sasuke's shoulders and took a seat next to him. Sasuke frowned as he stared into his face. He looked familiar. "I'm your neighbor from 9A? Uzumaki Naruto?" The older boy shrugged. "I've got a brother in your class, Ryo? Loud blonde kid?" Sasuke stared at him. His voice was familiar too. "I know you." Uzumaki sighed and nodded. "I didn't know if you would remember." "You were there that night," Sasuke whispered. "You faced him." "I was there," Uzumaki confirmed. "I wouldn't call what I did facing him. I just stalled him until the Anbu arrived." "Why were you there? How did you know something was happening? Why did no one else notice?" Sasuke demanded. Uzumaki let out a heavier sigh and leaned back on his hands, staring at the night sky. "You've heard of chakra sensing in the academy, right?" Sasuke frowned. "Yeah, the Nidaime was famous for it. What does that have to do with anything?" "I was born with the ability. I'm the only one in the village who has it. I came home from a mission that night and tried to find Ryo. Instead, I felt chakra signatures disappearing in the Uchiha compound. I set my friend, Kazuya, to alert the Anbu while I headed straight for you." Sasuke considered his words. "It's not a coincidence that the Hokage put me in the flat next to yours, is it?" "No, it isn't." Uzumaki looked back down to Sasuke. "I asked the Hokage to do it." "Why?" Sasuke snapped, shoving the blanket off him. "You don't even know me. You think just because you were there that night, you have the right to make decisions for me?" "No, Sasuke. I asked the Hokage to do it because I know what you're going through. I know what you're about to go through, and I want to help you. I don't want you to struggle like I have." "What, your brother killed your clan?" Sasuke huffed, hugging his knees to his chest. "I lost my whole family in one night," Uzumaki simply said, and Sasuke snapped his head round to stare at the older boy. It was during the Kyuubi attack, the same night that my sensing ability activated. My parents were killed in the attack, and I had to feel their chakra leave this world. I woke up in the hospital and they were gone. Sasuke couldn't imagine that, feeling his parents dying. It was bad enough seeing their bodies after the fact. I've never told anyone that, so I'll ask you to keep it to yourself, especially from Ryo. He nodded as Uzumaki continued. What people don't realize is when you lose your parents, you lose way more than that. My godparents, my adoptive aunts and uncles, even my house and all my possessions. My entire world crashed down around me overnight. I had to build everything over from scratch. Thankfully, Ryo was born that night, so he kept me sane in my new life. Uzumaki smiled, but his expression clouded. You're 8. You've never lived alone. You've never had to fend for yourself. You've always had your family there for you, but now you don't. I don't want you to have to fend for yourself, to have to learn everything the hard way, like I did. I can tell you that it's no fun. Conflicting emotions churned in Sasuke's gut. He felt insulted that this relative stranger thought he was incapable of looking after himself, but the way that Uzumaki spoke, this wasn't pity or doubt. Uzumaki genuinely believed what he was saying. We missed an electric bill when we first became Genin. We were still learning how bills worked. Kazuya took Ryo for a surprise sleepover at the Inuzukas, while I had to beg the electricity company to turn our heating back on for the 2 days before we could get enough D ranks to pay the bill. It was in the dead of winter, so the flat was absolutely freezing. Sasuke stared at Uzumaki in horror before the older boy chuckled. Don't get me wrong, I'm very proud of how far we've come. Ryo is growing up into a great kid. His smile faded. It's a lot, though. You constantly have to be thinking and balancing. Rent, bills, groceries, appointments, academy supplies, missions, training, errands, chores. I don't know where I'd be without Kazuya. Sasuke considered his words. It really did sound like a lot. Would he have to do all that now? Did his mother do all that for him before? But we had to learn all this the hard way. Uzumaki picked up the blanket and placed back around Sasuke's shoulders. It would have been so much easier if we had someone there to tell us how it all worked whenever we needed it. I want to be that person for you. Sasuke clutched the blanket tighter to him. I also want to do it for your mother. You knew Kasan? Sasuke demanded, the blanket slipping slightly. We've met before, you know, Uzumaki remarked. You were about 4 years old and had dropped an onion at the market. You were with Makoto-san and she told me how much you liked tomatoes. I bought you one and your little face just lit up like a lantern at the Rinne festival. Sasuke tried to remember, but the memories were murky. I ran into your mother a lot on D ranks to the market. She was amazing. No matter how many questions I asked her, she always answered them all. She was also the one to teach us the best way to get blood out of clothing, which I can tell you saved us countless times on laundry. Uzumaki pulled a small, well-worn notebook out of his jacket pocket. He handed it over and Sasuke took it, swallowing a lump as he read the cover. Scrawled in an academy student's handwriting was Mikoto-san's Secrets to Life. Opening it, he flicked through the book and took in the pages and pages of notes. He recognized some of these recipes. Kasan had made that tomato soup for him the day he started the academy. Kazuya and I wrote down every bit of advice she ever gave us. Uzumaki stood and stretched his arms above his head. That's yours now. Mikoto-san would want you to have it. Sasuke closed the book and held it close to his chest. I'm not here to force you to accept my help, Sasuke. I'm just here to let you know our door is always open to you. If you need anything, any help or advice, I promise I'll always be there for you. Uzumaki walked to the edge of the roof. Kazuya makes a great breakfast. We've got some tomatoes too if you feel like joining us. The older boy hopped over the edge of the roof and Sasuke watched him go, still clutching the notebook in his arms. A sharp gust blew across the roof and Sasuke pulled the blanket closer around himself. Sasuke hesitated in front of the door, the blanket folded up in his arms. Finally, he reached up and knocked. There was a few seconds of muffled thumps before the door was wrenched open. Uzumaki grinned at him from the doorway. Morning, Sasuke. Come on in, Kazuya has just finished cooking. Sasuke took off his sandals and followed the older boy inside. The flat was cluttered but cozy, with little notes and pictures scattered around. A line of plants were under the large window in the back wall. The bookcases in the corners of the room were overflowing with scrolls, and neither of the multicolored rugs matched. It had a very different sort of feel to his house back in the Uchiha compound. It was packed and colorful, and somehow seemed to perfectly fit the grinning redhead that was ushering him to the table. "This is Arai Kazuya, and you know Ryo." Sasuke awkwardly sat at the kitchen table, putting the blanket on his lap and staring across at Ryo as the blonde inhaled the last of his omoris. He had seen the younger Uzumaki in his class, but they had never really spoken. Sasuke kept to himself, while the Uzumaki stuck to his group of Inuzuka, Nara, and Akimichi. He looked over to the slumped figure next to the blonde, to see the brunette that was in his hospital room after that night. Uzumaki placed a plate in front of him, and Sasuke felt his stomach rumble at the sight of the omoris and fried tomatoes. "Thank you," he said quietly, picking up his chopsticks. The younger Uzumaki picked up his plate and utensils and dropped them into the sink. "I'm heading over to Kiba's. The litter was finally born last night, and I'm going to help look after them." "So Kiba's finally going to get his own dog, huh?" Uzumaki grinned over a steaming mug. "Yup." As the blonde bounced out the door, Arai finally raised his head. "Get me some coffee, Aka-chan. You've already had 2. I'll need at least another 3 to cope with today." Uzumaki rolled his eyes but went over to grab another steaming mug. Sasuke slowly began to eat the rice as Uzumaki sat across from him. He stared as Uzumaki took a sip of his own tea. He was just wearing a black t-shirt today. Swirling tattoos ran up his left arm on top of thick straight lines that ran all the way to his fingertips. Symbols and kanji were scattered around seemingly at random, and Sasuke couldn't recognize any of them. "Curious, huh?" Sasuke startled at Uzumaki's voice. "Sorry, Uzumaki-san." "Naruto, please." He lifted the sleeve of his t-shirt, and Sasuke could see the tattoo ran up all the way to the top of his shoulder. This happened during the Kyuubi attack, too. Got hit by rubble, and the Kyuubi's chakra corrupted my pathways. Had to get it sealed off so it didn't spread to the rest of my body. Can't use chakra in this arm anymore. Arai shot the redhead a sharp look over his coffee, but remained quiet. Naruto dropped the sleeve and grinned wryly. "It happened a long time ago. I'd say I've adjusted pretty well. Got some pretty cool tattoos out of it, too." Naruto's grin dropped and he stood, going to gather some papers from the coffee table. "Sasuke, we've identified the bodies and prepared them for burial." He placed the papers on the kitchen table. "It's your family, so I spoke to the Hokage and you get the final say on the funeral arrangements." "Funeral?" Sasuke dropped his chopsticks as his appetite left him. "There's not a single person in the village that didn't lose someone they know that night." Naruto grimaced. "There's going to be a village-wide funeral held in a couple days, but I wanted to talk to you about it first." "Why you?" "I work at the mission assignment desk. I'm working with the public relations office to arrange missions to organize it. I'm also the only one at the desk who can focus on this full-time right now since I'm not shared out to another department. The Funjutsu division isn't full-time." "What if I'd refused your help?" "Then I would have sent a hawk, and you would have done this in one of the private rooms at the administration offices with a chunin from public relations. I meant it when I said I wouldn't push anything on you." Sasuke stared down at the papers, before finally nodding. As they began to work through the documents, Sasuke couldn't help but feel a tiny glow of gratitude towards this boy. The thought of having to sort through this by himself made him feel physically sick. Maybe he would take Naruto up on his offer for help every now and then. Chapter 19. Can I live without you? Sasuke frowned at the page in front of him. In which country was the majority of the Second Shinobi War fought in? He was sure that Iruka-sensei had mentioned it at some point, but he couldn't remember when. They had been fighting Iwa and Suna, he knew that at least, but where were the main battles? He knew it had something to do with a guy called Hanzo who fought the Sannin a bunch of times. History or geography? Sasuke looked up at Ryo opposite him. The blonde had joined him a while ago at the kitchen table, but hadn't said anything. It had been a few weeks since the funeral, and while he felt more comfortable around Naruto and Kazuya, It was still a bit awkward around the youngest Uzumaki. They didn't acknowledge each other at the academy, and here, Naruto or Kazuya usually led the conversations. Naruto had helped him retrieve some of his stuff from the compound, so he at least had some clothes and furniture now. The apartment still felt too big, too empty, so whenever they offered to let Sasuke come over here, he leapt at the chance. He was still getting the hang of cooking his own meals, and Kazuya had taken to just adding his laundry to their pile. The Uzumaki household was very different to his childhood home. Kasan had always kept the clan house clean, organized, and running smoothly. It had also always been quiet. With his father around, they were expected to act like a proper clan head's family. There had been no pranks, no running around, no chaos. They had each had their roles, and they were expected to excel within them. Sasuke had expectations to meet, even though he felt like he never really met any of them. The Uzumakis were chaos, all on different schedules and all taking up roles as and when needed. There was always noise in the flat from one source or another, and there was always a project going on. It was busy, with no expectations other than to be yourself. He had felt lost at first, with no clear, defined rules to follow, but he was slowly managing to get used to it. "History," he answered gruffly. "The homework from Tuesday." "The second war stuff? I'll trade you that for this geography homework. How am I supposed to know what country Tanyanagakure is in?" Sasuke finished that yesterday. There was a part of him that was tempted to take Ryo up on that offer, but pride held his tongue. He should be able to do his own homework. He's the last of his clan. He has to uphold their reputation now that they're gone. "Hey, what country is Tanigakure in?" Sasuke frowned at the blonde. "Come on, Sasuke." Ryo plopped his chin on the table as his violet eyes stared pathetically at Sasuke. "You're the top of our class. You gotta know the answer." Sasuke stared back at Ryo, unimpressed. "Doesn't your brother know the entire elemental nation's geography off the top of his head?" He sat back in his chair. "That's half his job." "And what, am I supposed to just absorb that knowledge through living with him?" Ryo slumped back in his own chair dramatically. "He does paperwork, it's boring. It's not something I ask him about." Sasuke rolled his eyes. "The land of rivers," he grudgingly answered. Ryo grinned brightly and scribbled the answer down. He looked like Naruto when he smiled like that. It was a little bit different, though. Naruto's had an undertone of warmth, but wasn't quite as bright, as if it was dimmed by something behind his eyes that people couldn't see. "What about you? What's the question?" Sasuke kept quiet. Ryo may not have been at the bottom of the class, but he was still lower than him in the class rankings. "I'm top of the class in history, you know?" Sasuke narrowed his eyes in suspicion. "I swear." He held up his hands. "I even beat Sakura-chan last time. My grades get pulled down by maths and geography and stuff." He considered Ryo for a long moment, glancing down the blank space before sighing. "The main country the Second Shinobi War was fought in." "Oh, Ame," Ryo replied immediately. "Yeah, although we fought Iwa and Suna, a lot of the fighting were in the minor countries. Ame got slammed with a lot of the fighting, especially since they had Hanzo, who was a heavyweight like the Sannin. Although they actually lost that fight. We actually had some skirmishes in the Land of Rivers with Suna, but no one really mentions that since so much went on in Ame. They got pretty mad that we fought on their lands, so we had to settle after the war with some trade agreements, but that worked out for both sides." Sasuke stared at Ryo in shock. "How the fuck do you know that? The Land of Rivers wasn't mentioned at all in class." "I spent a lot of time around the Hokage growing up," Ryo shrugged casually, putting his arms behind his head. "He used to babysit me. He would tell me stories about the wars and the effects of them on Konoha while he did his paperwork." "Why would he watch you?" "Nisan couldn't watch me while he was at the academy, so Hokage Jiji used to watch me in his office before we met the Inuzuka. I used to go see him all the time until I started the academy." Sasuke let out a quiet huh and wrote the answer neatly in the blank space. Ryo had always sat at the back of the class with the slackers. Nara just slept, Akimichi just ate, and Inuzuka was just dumb. All three were at the bottom of the class rankings and appeared to have no intentions to trying to raise their grades. Sasuke had thought that the youngest Uzumaki was the same. even if his grades made it to roughly the middle of the class. There was more to Ryo than he thought, just like the rest of his weird family. The contrast between Sasuke's life before and his life now almost made things easier to handle, even as he felt the grief lurking in the back of his mind, ready to crush him at any moment. Naruto slid into his seat beside Hana, grinning as he closed his eyes and inhaled the delicious scents coming off the dishes in front of him. He loved team dinners. They always made all their favorites, and it was a whole night off from worrying about their lives. He opened his eyes and shrugged off his jacket, hanging it on the back of his chair as he secured his hair into a ponytail. Eating with hair in his way was annoying. "So where are the kids tonight?" Genma smiled as he took out the senbon from his mouth and popped it onto the table. "You've got the two now, right? It's only been a couple months since Sasuke came to stay next door." Naruto frowned. Ryo went to the Inuzuka, but Sasuke isn't close enough to anyone for that. He said he wanted to go through some of his clan stuff tonight, so I made him some tomato soup and told him where to find us if he needs us, Kazuya added. "He'll want to be on his own for that anyway." Naruto dropped his gaze to the table. "That kind of thing was private." "How is he doing?" Hana spoke up. "How would you be doing if you lost your clan?" Hana didn't answer, but her face went pale. "Come on, guys. Sasuke is tough," Naruto continued. "He might not be okay now, but he will be with time and a bit of help. Now let's eat. He'd hate it if he knew we were talking about him." "Yeah, let's talk about the other kids." Kazuya grinned as he dumped some rice onto his plate. "Hana, how are the puppies?" She hesitated, but appeared to shake something off. "They're fine." She took some barbecue pork. Finally weaned off their mother, and a pup has picked Kiba. Turned out to be the runt too. He named him Akamaru. He won't be able to take him to the academy until their second year, though. Naruto smiled as he took some barbecue for himself. Kiba had been desperate for a dog of his own for ages. He would look forward to when the kid brought the puppy around to their flat in the near future. "How are they doing in the academy?" Genma pointed a chopstick in their direction. "It's been 9 months, more than enough time for them to cause as much trouble as you guys did." Kazuya rolled his eyes. "We hardly caused trouble, Genma-sensei. Most would see graduating early as an achievement, not as a troublemaking scheme as everyone seems to think. Besides, since we ended the war with Kumo, they can't move up a year even if they tried. The graduation age was set to a minimum of 11, remember? Ryo and Sasuke are doing well," Naruto added fondly. "Sasuke is top of his class and Ryo is keeping up. He even got full marks on the last history test they had." "I wish I could say the same for Kiba," Hana groaned. "Kasan has to fight him to get any progress reports, and they aren't good." "We knew before he started that studying wouldn't be a strong point," Kazuya pointed out. "His grades will shoot up next year once they get stuck into the more practical parts of the curriculum." Hana stuffed another piece of meat into her mouth, muffling her next groan. "Do they still segregate the girls for kunoichi classes?" "As far as I know." Genma-sensei nodded, twirling some noodles around his chopstick. "I think it's still in second and third year electives." "I think it's still completely unfair," the brunette huffed. "I would have killed to learn how to sew in the academy. There's so much I would have loved to learn that they didn't teach the boys." "You think you had it rough?" Hana snapped back. "I had to learn flower arranging while you guys got to learn trap making from a former hunter nin. How is that fair? Plus, where is the first aid?" Kazuya threw up his hands. Naruto snapped out to grab the egg that had been flung from the other boy's chopsticks. "The basic medical training? Nowhere in the curriculum is it to be found." Naruto exchanged a weary look with Genma-sensei as the other two worked themselves up. It was an old argument that wasn't even an argument considering that they agreed on the subject. Kazuya had been listing the failings of the academy since the day he was enrolled there, and the moment Hana had found out she had to take kunoichi lessons, she had joined in. Naruto also agreed with them, but he kept quiet. It was dumb that boys and girls had to have different lessons for a part of the academy. Hana had been teaching them the stuff she had learnt since they had graduated, and the pair of them had used it so much. Kazuya, in particular, had managed to incorporate most of it into his medical and poison training. They said that the girls had to learn these skills for infiltration missions. But Naruto could see no reason boys could not be sent on these same missions. They were ninja. They should be able to disguise as either gender and be undetected. That was the point of their training. He had brought it up to Hijiri at the desk, but the other Chunin had pointed out that a wig and makeup would only hold up for a few hours, and a henge wasn't suitable for the long term. There currently was no viable disguise method for long-term infiltration as the opposite gender. Come on, guys, Genma-sensei finally spoke up, as Kazuya and Hana continued to vent. You've been complaining about this for years. Leave it for tonight, it'll still be a problem tomorrow. As Kazuya and Hana reluctantly left the topic alone, moving on to the much safer discussion of Hana's veterinarian training, Naruto's thoughts remained stuck. There must be a way to create a long-term henge that couldn't be dispelled. It can't be that hard. Surely there would be a seal or something that would help. He had one that changed his hair, but that couldn't be removed once applied. There had to be an in-between. He had a couple of rare days off coming up. It wouldn't hurt to just have a look at his scrolls, just to see if it was possible. Kazuya trekked to Training Ground 5 in search of his friend. Naruto had been absent since the team dinner 3 weeks ago, and he had no idea what the redhead was up to. He saw the other boy for meals, and that was pretty much it. He knew it was Fuinjutsu related, though. He had seen the same pattern for 4 years now. Ryo also knew what was up, but poor Sasuke had been blindsided. He just didn't know what Naruto was cooking up. Could be anything from another type of storage seal to something that could wipe out a village. You never knew with him. He finally spotted a head of long red hair in the middle of the training ground, and he called out, "Hey, Akachan? Where the fuck have you been? Poor Sasuke has forgotten what you look like." He missed a step as a female voice answered back. "Sasuke hasn't forgotten shit. I went food shopping with him 2 days ago." Kazuya stopped a few meters away as the redhead turned around. He was faced by a girl a few years younger than him. Long, straight red hair hung around a tanned face with high cheekbones and bright blue eyes. A long scar marred the left side of her face, and Kazuya narrowed his eyes. "Naruto?" The girl rolled her eyes as she turned, picking up the familiar orange jacket from where it had been placed on the ground. She shrugged it on over the black t-shirt. "Duh, who else would it be? Last I checked, the Naruto I know was missing half a chromosome." She shot him a confused look before a familiar expression crossed her face. Kazuya knew that look. His friend just had a bad idea. "Hey, can you punch me in the face?" "Why?" "I need to prove that this henge will stay in place and my seal works." That literally explains nothing. Naruto sighs, as if Kazuya should be able to read her mind, and it was all his fault that she hadn't explained anything. Should he still be referring to her as a she, if it was his male friend under the henge? The stuff you guys were saying at the team dinner got me thinking. I want to create a way for both genders to be able to go on any infiltration mission in a way that wouldn't dispel. So I figured the best way to do that was to build on the henge and use Fuinjutsu to make sure that it stuck. Kazuya nodded along. The best part is that with the henge, I'm not actually copying anyone's appearance. It's just me as a girl. So for anyone using this technique, they won't be busted for copying since it will be their own form. So what are you gonna call it? Oiroke no Jutsu or something dumb like that? Kazuya joked. Naruto shot him a strange look. No, I was thinking more along the lines of Seitenkan? Kazuya nodded, before he moved on something that had been pressing on his mind. So is it solid? Punch me and find out? That can't be the only way to find out. Naruto was about to reply when a voice shouted out from behind them. "Hey guys, I heard you two were around here. What are you up to?" Genma-sensei came up to them, waving cheerfully. He stopped next to Kazuya, and he smirked as he waited for their sensei to detect the difference. It could be hard to notice since Naruto had long hair even in his regular male form, and the orange jacket covered up his frame. "Testing out a new seal." "Of course you are." Genma grinned back. "When are you not?" Kazuya waited patiently as Genma looked at Naruto, his grin dropping as he stared for a long moment. "Is there something different about you? I'm a girl. You weren't always a girl." "Nope." "Okay. Kazuya sighed. Naruto figured out a way around the gender segregation for missions. It means that both males and females can go on all missions. Something clicked. Which means that the girls don't have to be separated out in the academy anymore. Everyone can get taught everything equally. Seriously? Genma-sensei looked impressed. It was a simple solution in the end. Naruto shrugged, pulling up his non-brace sleeve to show a seal stuck onto his forearm. This seal keeps the henge from dispelling no matter what. The henge stops when the seal comes off. The only drawback is that you can only switch to your opposite gender. It doesn't work if you're copying another's appearance. Their sensei beamed at him. This is amazing, Naruto. This will have major implications for both future education and missions. You might have just changed infiltration missions as we know it. Naruto tore the seal off his arm and was surrounded by a puff of smoke, reverting back to his male form. Kazuya and Hana will have to find a new topic to argue about, he grinned back at him. Kazuya stared at his friend in awe. Naruto never failed to amaze him. However, Genma grabbed his and Naruto's shoulders. Can you see how this seal might be abused? Kazuya shared a look with Naruto. Abused? Did he mean it could get stolen by another village? You two really don't see a potential issue with this? No? It could get stolen? Genma-sensei sighed and started to guide them out of the training ground. I guess it's time for your sex and gender education. A bit early for you, Naruto, but necessary if you're going to be changing into a girl every so often. Wait, I thought we already had that? Kazuya shot out, dragging his feet. When you graduate the academy, you get to talk about sexual violence before you leave the village on missions, yes. Genma-sensei nodded. This one is a bit different. Normally, your family or clan would teach this to you once you hit puberty, but since you don't have either, it's up to me as your sensei. But I don't care about girls. Kazuya shot out desperately. Plus, I already know all the anatomy and stuff. Then I'll teach you about boys. Plus, there's more to relationships than just the anatomy, Kazuya. You know that. Kazuya looked frantically over at Naruto to see if he'd come up with a way out of this inevitably embarrassing conversation. The redhead shrugged back at him. Absolutely useless. We'll have to give this talk to Ryo and Sasuke someday, said Naruto. We'll have to hear it at some point. Kazuya let out a groan as Genma-sensei began his talk, still dragging them out of the training ground. Thank you for your service over the past 10 years. I relieve you of your duty as an Ambu captain. You are to return to the standard forces as an elite Junin. Kakashi stared at the ground in front of the Hokage's feet. He should have been expecting this. While he may have done good work with the root operation years ago, his recent failure with Itachi could not be overlooked. If only he had been able to steer Itachi towards a better path when he had been his subordinate. If only he had been a better influence on the kid. Kakashi-kun. He lifted his gaze to see the Hokage holding out his hand. He dutifully reached out and took his hand, remaining in his knelt position in front of his leader. The Hokage smiled kindly down at him. You have given so much to this village. This is not a punishment, this is gratitude. You are free from the restrictions of Ambu. In fact, I believe there's a birthday boy who would love to see you today. Kakashi blinked. It was Ryo's birthday today. He had missed Naruto's 5 days ago, and he would have missed Ryo's too. How long had it been since he had been in the village for their birthdays? It can't have been long after Naruto graduated the academy. Had he really been avoiding them for so long? It felt like the time had passed in the blink of an eye. It had been easy to just take mission after mission without thinking. A part of Kakashi also had to admit that the longer he went without seeing them, and the more that guilt built up, the more he wanted to avoid them. He just didn't want to deal with the guilt and shame. He knew how disappointed Minato-sensei would be in him. It was easier to avoid them, even if it made that horrible pit in his gut deepen and darken with each passing day. He let go of the Hokage's hand and stood to his full height. He bowed low. Thank you, Hokage-sama. You may go. Kakashi took a step back and shunshined away. He reappeared in his empty apartment, letting out a heavy sigh. He pulled off his tanto from his back and placed it against the wall beside his weapons chest. He shucked off his Ambu armor and chucked it harshly in the direction of his wardrobe. His whole career was gone. He had to start over again in the regular forces. No more assassinations, no more traveling for months on end, no more high-risk missions, no more using Ambu as an excuse to avoid everything else in his life. At least, Guy will be happy. He stepped forward and pulled his sleeveless shirt over his head, taking a moment to breathe without his mask covering his face. He grabbed another shirt from his closet and pulled it on, the mask attached and the sleeves hiding his tattoo. He shrugged on his green Junin vest next, which had remained untouched since he had joined Ambu 10 years ago. There was no point putting this off anymore. He hopped out of his window and headed across the rooftops. He finally came to the apartment building, and he stopped in front of it, looking up. He had always known where the boys lived. The minute they had moved out of the orphanage, Kakashi had made sure he knew where they had gone. He had still somehow managed to avoid actually going to the apartment. He had no idea how Minato-sensei's sons lived. He had been at least putting in the effort to be there while they had still been in the orphanage. The first 4 years of Ryo's life, while Kakashi had been away for most of it, he knew he at least managed to help Naruto somewhat. He taught the kid to read, helped feed them, babysat Ryo. It just seemed like the moment Naruto moved out and became a genin, he didn't need Kakashi anymore. He didn't need anyone more, especially since Kazuya moved in with him. Kakashi didn't want to let the kid down. If he didn't try, he couldn't fail. It was easy to back off and get absorbed into Ambu missions, but he couldn't do that anymore. He would see them around the village, and Naruto worked at the desk. He would just have to face them and accept their rejection. He had essentially abandoned them. He wouldn't blame them for feeling that way. He climbed the steps until he reached the door with the sign 9A. He shoved his hands in his pockets as he shuffled his feet in front of the door, building up the nerve to knock. The door suddenly opened up, and he stared at the unimpressed boy in front of him. Naruto had really grown since he'd last seen him. He now came up to Kakashi's shoulder, and his deep red hair had grown to his shoulder blades. It was half up today, with the red contrasting against his black t-shirt and his familiar brace. The scar on his face, while still prominent, was finally starting to fade in color closer to his skin tone. His clear blue eyes bored into Kakashi's own, and he could almost see the thoughts swirling behind those eyes. He really was all grown up. It almost didn't matter that he was only 12. The way he held himself was beyond any of the genin his age around the village. "Kakashi," Naruto drawled. "What a surprise." Kakashi's sweat dropped. "Ma, Naruto-kun?" He smiled. "I just came to wish Ryo a happy birthday." "He's not here." Before Kakashi had a moment to process those words, Naruto had let go of the door and turned around. "Come on in," he called behind him. "Might as well see the place at least once." Kakashi clenched his fists inside his pockets for a moment before he stepped through the threshold, toeing off his sandals in the doorway. He looked around the apartment and swallowed the hard lump that had formed in his throat. It was small, at least for 3 growing boys. The kitchen was shoved into the corner to his left, with a cluttered table just barely leaving enough room to move around the space. A couple of old couches were almost in the middle of the room, even as much as the boys tried to shove them to the right side to surround a battered metal coffee table. Overflowing bookcases, stuffed full of mismatching books and scrolls, had been placed in each of the right corners, and underlining the wide window of the back wall was a variety of plants of every shape and size. A couple of mismatched but colorful rugs were thrown on the floor, and as Kakashi scanned the gray walls, pictures and diagrams and training programs were tacked up at random. It was small, with barely any space to move around freely, but as Kakashi spotted the childish pictures hung on the fridge, he knew it didn't matter to them. They had built a home here. It was cluttered and mismatched and full of the same love that Kakashi could remember filled Minato-sensei's and Kushina-ni's home. He had been right to avoid coming here. It already hurt. Naruto was at the kitchen table, clearing up papers and muttering beneath his breath. "Ryo, Sasuke, Kiba, Ryo, Sasuke, Kiba, Choji? Why do we have Choji's homework? Is this Kaz's list for the flower shop? He lost this 2 days ago. Idiot. Ryo again, it's like he forgets we need to eat on this table." He looked up at Kakashi. "Well, sit." He moved over to dump the pile of papers on the already messy coffee table. Kakashi sat slowly onto one of the chairs and watched Naruto make his way to his own chair opposite to him. An awkward silence descended on them, and Kakashi avoided the boy's gaze. "So you came for Ryo's birthday?" Kakashi forced himself to eye-smile. "Yup. He's 9 today, right?" "Yeah." Naruto crossed his arms. "I'm surprised you know that, since you've missed the last 3. Kakashi tried not to flinch. "Ma, you know how it gets, Naruto. Anbu missions take me away from the village for a long time. I'm not some bright-eyed little kid anymore, Kakashi." Naruto was unimpressed. "You haven't been there for us because of your missions, I get that, but you seem to forget that I can sense you when you're in the village. You've been avoiding us more and more lately, and spending way more time at the memorial stone." That was a factor that Kakashi had not considered. Naruto would have been able to tell when Kakashi was avoiding him. The dark pit of guilt in his gut only deepened. Naruto let out a heavy sigh and slumped in his chair. "I'm not trying to make you miserable, Kakashi. I'm sure you do enough of that to yourself. I just want to be sure." "Sure of what?" "Sure of you." Naruto threw his hands up. "Why are you here today? What changed?" Kakashi knew he owed the kid at least this. "I was discharged from Anbu today. I'm a regular Junin from today onwards." Naruto narrowed his eyes in thought, and Kakashi's breath caught in his throat. It was so similar to how Minato-sensei used to look when he was thinking something over. And it means I'll be in the village more. It means I can be here." "You could have been here before." Kakashi didn't know how to reply to that. It was true. He could have made an effort to be here outside of his missions. Naruto let out another sigh and drew a hand down his face. "Ryo still adores you, you know? You're his godfather. Every time you visit, he spends the next month talking about you." Kakashi looked back at him in surprise. "But you can't keep doing this. You can't keep half-assing family." Naruto gazed at him, his eyes like steel. "Don't get me wrong, you helped us a lot in the first few years, and you aren't the worst person in our lives by far, but I won't let you hurt Ryo. So either you're in or you're out. You either commit to being there for Ryo, or you break ties with him properly." Kakashi thought over his words. Naruto didn't want to let him back in, not without knowing he was serious. Kakashi examined his own thoughts. While conflicted and guilty, the idea of cutting himself off completely from these boys was unimaginable. "I'll be here. I promise." "Look, Kakashi," Naruto sighed. "I know Tusan wanted us to be like brothers or something, but that's never gonna happen." Kakashi's stomach dropped. "I don't even feel like I'm younger than you. I'm now raising 2 kids, sometimes more when Ryo brings his friends around. I have to keep up 2 jobs and make sure that not only I am put together, but everyone else is too. Kazuya is there, but he has his own life to live. He never signed up to be a parent." "Neither did you," Kakashi said quietly. "I signed up the moment my parents died." Naruto chuckled, but the sound was hollow. "I've always known, and I accepted it a long time ago. I knew what I was signing up for when I told the Hokage to put Sasuke next door. These kids are my responsibility. End of story." Naruto looked up from where his gaze had dropped to the table. "So I need to know if you are serious, because if you stay and then leave again, it's going to hurt Ryo, and I can't allow that if I can help it. I will be here. Maybe not every day, but I will be here." "Good." Naruto placed both hands on the table and stood. "I know that we'll never be close like Tusan wanted or like Ryo, but maybe we can be friends," he offered a small grin. Kakashi nodded, also moving to stand. He couldn't exactly ask for more than that. It was more than enough that the kid know that Naruto was offering him this second chance in the first place. Going forward, he just had to focus on being a good godfather to Ryo. By the sounds of it, that would help Naruto more than anything. It wasn't too late for Ryo like it appeared to be for Naruto. He had to respect Naruto as a fellow adult and shinobi. "Now come on," Naruto waved his hand. "The gang are all at Ichiraku. The ramen is going to get cold." Sasuke fiddled with his obi nervously. His mother had always tied it for him, but he had never paid attention. Now he wished he had actually listened to her when she used to teach him about formal wear. She had insisted it was a part of his duty as the head son, but he had hated wearing them. Now she was gone, and he had to figure it out for himself. "Hey, need some help there?" Naruto smiled gently at him as he came over to the sofa from the kitchen. No, Sasuke replied grumpily. You aren't even wearing a kimono. Aha! Naruto scratched the back of head sheepishly. No, Kaz and I don't have one, but Ryo has always worn one for the Rinne festival. The redhead himself was for once wearing something other than that obnoxious orange jacket. His black trousers were still taped into his black shinobi sandals, but his brace was missing, his tattoos on full display. His black t-shirt was tucked in, and an orange sash was tied around his waist, the tails hanging on one side to his knees. His hair was tied up in an intricate braid that had end in a low bun, and Sasuke raised an eyebrow at the white flowers woven throughout the design. It was a very different look to the usually bright orange, chaotic boy that Sasuke had gotten to know. Come on, you know I can help. Fine. Sasuke stood abruptly and held his arms out, biting his cheek. Naruto watched his face for a moment before moving to kneel, adjusting the obi. Sasuke had chosen a traditional Navy Uchiha clan kimono with a white obi, the same style his father had worn the year before. He could clearly picture the Uchiha fan proudly displayed between his shoulder blades. You're very brave to be going to this festival. What? Sasuke snapped. The first Rinne festival after I lost my family, I didn't go. I didn't go to the second one either. I couldn't face going without them, even if it is a time we are supposed to be honoring the dead. It was only when Ryo got older that I started going, because I didn't want to deprive him of the experience. Sasuke mulled over his words for a moment, tasting blood in his mouth. Kasan was the one to always tie my obi for me. Naruto tied the final knot and smiled up at him, his eyes glassy. She'd be so proud of you. Their quiet moment was soon interrupted as Ryo bounced out of his room. We're gonna be late. We are not going to be late, Kazuya called back from the kitchen. The sky lanterns won't be lit for hours, and I got the flowers in advance. Come on, Kazumi, Ryo whined. We're all ready. Let's just go. Naruto playfully rolled his eyes at Sasuke as he stood and turned to his brother. He straightened out his green forest-inspired kimono and lightly whacked Ryo on the head. We'll go when I say we'll go. Ah, Ni-san. Sasuke watched the scene and swallowed. His first Rinne festival without his family. Could he do this? Kazuya, do you have the candles? Yeah, they're by the door. Ryo, go get the flowers from the fridge. Sasuke? Sasuke looked into soft blue eyes. You ready? Sasuke nodded quickly, not trusting himself to speak. He followed the group out the apartment and they were soon walking through the softly lit streets of Konoha. Sasuke used to love the Rinne festival. Right before New Year's it was a time to exchange gifts and remember those who had passed on. Even in the middle of winter, his kimono had always been enough to keep him warm, and with all the lanterns that lined the streets, it had made the village seem like a different world. Now, though, too many people had passed on. There were too many people to remember. Every person he saw walking by laughing was a reminder that everyone else had moved on, had forgotten what had happened to his family. An entire clan was removed from Konoha overnight, and not even 5 months later, no one cared anymore. He didn't pay attention to where Naruto was leading them. He stared at the ground so he didn't have to see the villagers' faces or the twinkling lights. This was a bad idea. He shouldn't have come. He should have just stayed in his flat. He wasn't ready for this. He just focused on putting one step in front of the other, as he tried to keep the emotions from overwhelming him. Sasuke. He kept his blurry gaze firmly on the ground in front of him. Sasuke. We're here. Confusion pierced through his grief for a moment as he stared up at Naruto. He finally looked around him to see they were stood in front of the Uchiha clan gates. Words caught in his throat as he gaped at the sea of candles that were lit beneath the entranceway, the lights reflecting off the repaired clan flags. Candles of every color flickered in front of his eyes, and the sheer number of them made it impossible to get anywhere near the gates themselves. It looked like everyone in the village had left a candle here. The village hadn't forgotten. They hadn't moved on. They had gone out of their way to light a candle on the Rinne festival in memory of his clan. Movement at his side drew his gaze back to his companions. He watched in silence as Kazuya drew several candles out of a bag and started handing them out. We have several stops to make tonight, but we decided that we should start here, Naruto spoke up. You needed to see this. Sasuke took the blue candle from Kazuya when he felt someone nudge his arm. Ryo was holding out a bouquet of white lilies. It's a tradition for us to leave white lilies for our families. The other boy shrugged. We brought one for you, since you probably had enough to think about tonight. Sasuke slowly took the bouquet. He took a step forward and hesitated at the edge of the sea of candles. He bent over slightly to light his candle from the one of the others, before changing course and walking a bit away and coming to a free section of wall. He knelt and placed the candle in front of the wall, the flowers just beside it. He got on his knees, tucking the kimono beneath him, and closed his eyes. Faces of his clan flashed through his mind, ending on his parents. Even months later, the grief weighed heavily on him, and the anger and confusion continued to build. Why had Itachi done this? Why did he feel like killing the clan was the only way to get power? Why had Sasuke been the only one to survive? He clapped his hands twice and inhaled a deep breath, exhaling slowly as he sent his prayers skyward. He would find Itachi one day and make him explain himself. Right now, he had to focus on getting stronger, on making sure that the Uchiha clan lived on, that he could one day repay Naruto for his support. He finally opened his eyes and gazed up at the high walls of the compound. He hadn't been near his family home since he had moved his stuff to his new apartment. He couldn't quite shake the ghosts that lingered in the empty streets. He finally stood and made his way back to the others, not at peace, but a little less lost than before. You ready to go? Sasuke nodded as he looked down at the 3 new additions to the collection of candles. He may never be able to sort through the mess of emotions born from that night, but it did feel a tiny bit easier knowing he wasn't completely alone. A large part of him fought against this feeling, insisting that as the last Uchiha he should be able to do this alone. But as he looked back at them, the voice faded to the background. His mother had trusted them, had helped them. They had given her a piece of her back to him. They had helped him with stuff that he wouldn't have even known where to begin, but had always given him a choice. They weren't his family, but they had somehow become important to him. And that, Sasuke thought as he followed them away from his clan compound, right now was enough. Naruto frowned as he pulled out 3 boxes of tomatoes from the fridge. Sasuke, any particular reason you're now stockpiling tomatoes in our fridge now? The culprit in question was sitting at the kitchen table with Ryo, working on what Naruto could guess was maths homework. There wasn't much else at the academy that involved that many numbers. Just in case, I see. Naruto smiled to himself as he placed them on the counter. He continued taking things out the fridge, occasionally sniffing them to see if they were still in date. It was his turn to clean out the fridge, and he had run out of excuses since the New Year's festival ended last week. Lay off, Naruto. Kazuya called from his place on the sofa, sewing needle in hand. If I recall, I found a stash of instant ramen not too long ago. Naruto whirled around, pointing a carrot at the brunette. Ramen is the food of the gods. Ramen is a cholesterol and sodium nightmare. You take that back, heathen. Their usual argument was interrupted by a knock at the door. Naruto held his position for a moment before he stomped over, throwing the carrot back towards the counter. He hauled the door open and blinked in surprise. Hana, Tsume-san. He heard vague scrambling behind him, but his attention was captured by the bundle of fur in Hana's arms. Well, are you going to invite us in or what? Tsume grinned, her canines peeking out. Yeah, sorry Tsume-san. Naruto stepped back and allowed the women in. He followed behind them and shrugged at Kazuya's confused stare. Tsume-san stared down at Sasuke and Ryo. Congrats, brats, for making it into your 2nd year. I heard you were the top of your class, Sasuke, and you helped drag Kiba through his history exam, Ryo. Thank you, Inuzuka-sama, Sasuke replied quietly. Thanks, Tsume-Obachan, Ryo grinned back. How many times? Drop the sama, Uchiha, Tsume rolled her eyes. Anyway, we're here on official clan business. Naruto stopped trying to silently extract information from Hana and stood to attention as Tsume turned to him. He felt Kazuya come to stand behind him. Hana stepped forward to stand beside her mother, and the bundle of fur in her arms squirmed. You have been great friends to the Inuzuka clan for many years, Uzumaki. You have aided the heir to the clan with her studies and protected her after her graduation. Your youngest clan member was practically raised among us. It is for these reasons that we extend this physical representation of the alliance between our two clans." Naruto's eyes widened. An alliance? That was a big deal. He knew that they were close to the Inuzuka. How could they not be? But an official alliance? This could change things. Ryo would have so much more political protection in the future. When Naruto passed on, Ryo would still have a clan to fall back on. The pressure wouldn't totally be on Kazuya to watch out for their little brother. He bowed low. "Thank you, Inuzuka-sama, for this trust you have extended to us. We would be honored to form an alliance with you and know that you will always be able to count on the Uzumaki clan." Tsume looked amused. "Been reading up on formal clan etiquette, huh? Likewise, brat, you have the Inuzuka clan behind you, Hana." Naruto looked over to his teammate as she held out her arms. Naruto carefully took the bundle out of her arms and stared wide-eyed down at his arms. "She was born into one of our litters as the runt. Her chakra pathways were warped at birth, so she can never be an Inuzuka dog as she can't use chakra." A puppy stared back at him. Her fur was a soft peach color, with the roots a creamy white and warming out to peach as the fur grew out. Her ears stuck up into triangles on top of her head, and warm brown eyes looked curiously up at him. Her cheeks and chest were cream, and her tail was curled onto their back. She was so soft, and her fur was so thick. Naruto wasn't sure he was ever going to let her go. "We know that you can give her a good home and treat her with the love and respect she deserves," Hana piped up, smiling. Naruto smiled sadly down at the puppy. "We will," Kazuya nodded. "What will you call her?" Tsume asked. "So I may tell her mother's partner. What about Momo?" They all looked at Ryo, who had left the kitchen table to join them near the entrance. He was entranced by the sight of the puppy. "You know," he said, explaining further at their stares. "'Cause of her fur." "That sounds perfect." Naruto grinned as Kazuya ruffled Ryo's hair. Ryo gently patted Momo's head, and the puppy sniffed at the blonde's fingers. Naruto looked over to see Sasuke staring awkwardly and motioned with his head. "Come meet the new family member." Sasuke rose hesitantly and made his way over. Naruto looked over to Tsume and nodded his head. Tsume nodded in response, the silent exchange missed by the other occupants of the room. Momo would have gone unnoticed back at the Inuzuka compound. An Inuzuka dog with no chakra couldn't be partnered up and couldn't use techniques. She would have been left behind and clumped together as part of a whole. The Inuzukas looked after their dogs, but here, Momo would get the individual love and attention she deserved. He placed Momo into Ryo's arms. She would fit right in here. Chapter 20. Blink and you miss it. Naruto jogged his way through the hallways of the academy, Kazuya close behind him. "I told you it was today." "Give me a break." Kazuya rolled his eyes. "I've been on night shift for like a month. I have no idea what day it is. And I've been reminding you for 2 weeks. Kazuya, remember that we have that parent-guardian meeting at the academy for Ryo and Sasuke." Yeah, we're here, aren't we?" Naruto fought the urge to snap back. His friend had been roped into extra shifts at the hospital, and he had barely seen the other boy. It had fallen to him to look after Ryo and Sasuke more and more over the past year, and since Momo had been added to the mix almost a year ago to the day, he had even more to stay on top of. He couldn't bring himself to resent Kazuya. The older boy had been steadily making his way up the ranks within the hospital, and Naruto couldn't be more proud. There was even talk of transferring him to the emergency department permanently, and Naruto knew that Kazuya had been working hard for that promotion. It just meant that Kazuya could spend less time at home. Naruto was happy for his adopted brother, but he was so used to life being them against the world. It had all changed so much after their Chunin promotion. Even 3 years later, Naruto still wasn't sure if he was ready to let the world in. He had to suck it up though. Kazuya would have a life long after Naruto kicked the bucket, just like the kids, and he couldn't hold his best friend back. Kazuya needed to build and shape his future. Naruto didn't. He slowed down as he reached the classroom door. Knocking on the door, he slid the door open and popped his head in. The Chunin inside turned his head, and Naruto grinned sheepishly. "Hi, Iruka-san," he said, stepping fully into the classroom. "Hope we're not running too late." He had met Umino Iruka a few months ago at the mission assignment desk. From the stories Ryo had told him about his teacher, he wasn't sure about the man at first. He knew he had lost family to the QB, but Ryo hadn't said anything about any mistreatment, just that he had a tendency to focus on other students. Ryo had mentioned they were going to get a second instructor for practical classes, but didn't know who it was yet. Naruto-san, Arai-san, you're not too late at all. Please come in and take a seat. Iruka gestured to the front benches of the classroom, and Naruto slid in, Kazuya right next to him. It had been ages since he'd last sat here. Had it really been 6 years? He had never been one to sit at the front, but he had never stuck to one classroom long enough to really settle in. Where did Ryo and Sasuke sit? They would have the same seat for 4 years. Iruka settled in a chair in front of them. So I understand you're here for both Uzumaki Norio and Uchiha Sasuke? He asked, one eyebrow raised as he looked down at the papers in his hands. Uchiha Sasuke does not have a legal guardian on file, as far as we're aware. We're his next-door neighbors, Naruto began to explain. We've been keeping an eye on him since the incident with his clan a year and a half ago. We help with his homework and training and stuff, and we asked his permission to be here as his stand-in guardians. You have the signed form from him, right? Iruka watched them silently for a moment before he nodded. I do, he agreed. I just wanted to be sure. He took out a paper from the pile on his lap. So we'll start with Sasuke then, he announced. So we do these evaluations at the beginning of the kid's 3rd year at the academy, as a kind of halfway point to see if they are keeping up with the work, or if we need to look at other options. I'm sure you're familiar with this, having been through these yourselves. Naruto chuckled awkwardly. Yeah, we did not do these, Kazuya winced. Iruka frowned. It's mandatory for all students who make to 3rd year. I understand you attended before the minimum graduation age was implemented, but you still should have had this meeting. I mean, we skipped over so much in the academy it was hard to keep track, Kazuya shrugged. We actually did start our 3rd year, but we didn't finish it, and we completely skipped 4th year. And half of 1st year, and half of 2nd, Naruto added helpfully. Iruka stared at the pair of them, but Kazuya continued. Plus, we didn't exactly have guardians to come to the meeting anyway. It all worked out in the end, Naruto said loudly over his friend. We're here to talk about the kids, not us. Right. Iruka seemed to shake something off. So Sasuke is currently our top student, excelling in both his academic and practical classes. His taijutsu in particular is the best of the clan children, and there are strong indications that he'll pick up the ninjutsu this year with no issues. His test scores are among the top students in every exam, and his weapon handling is exemplary. If he continues on his way with his chakra control, he'll have no issues with genjutsu either. Damn, the kid is good, Kazuya whistled, but Naruto frowned. But how is he doing with the other kids in class? How is he in group work or teams? Has he made any friends? He knew Sasuke was reserved, and that was fine. It was his personality, and Naruto didn't want to force him to be someone he wasn't. He also knew that what happened with his clan was weighing on him as heavily as the night as it had ensued. He had seen how Sasuke separated himself from Ryo and his friends when they came over, and how he avoided the villagers whenever he could. It wasn't healthy for him. Naruto knew he wasn't one to talk, but at least he had had Ryo, Kazuya, and Hana. Iruka sighed. Sasuke tends to keep to himself in class. He's certainly popular with the girls, but he doesn't engage with them. As far as group work, it depends on the team. If he is put with some of the better members of the class, he's usually fine. But if he's paired with some of the underachieving students, he tends to get frustrated quickly, and tries to complete the task on his own. It was exactly what Naruto feared. Sasuke trusted them, but to be a shinobi of Konoha, he needed to let other people in. They were lucky that Sasuke hadn't shut himself off completely, and they were making slow progress with him at home. But Sasuke was still pushing himself so hard. It was paying off in class, but Naruto couldn't help but worry it was hurting him in other ways. That'll balance out for him once he graduates and gets placed on a team though, right? Kazuya pointed out. He won't have the option to keep to himself. D ranks and team training will force him out of his shell. But he shouldn't be forced into anything. It should be a choice he makes for himself. Naruto frowned. We can't just wait until graduation either. His team won't fix everything. Look at us. We still don't know any of the people we went to academy with, and we met at least 3 years' worth of classes. We stood apart from the rest of Konoha until after we made Chunin, and I don't want the same for Sasuke. Naruto blinked. He had never quite realized that before. He had similar thoughts during the Chunin exams, but now looking back with Sasuke as a comparison, it was so clear. He didn't know anyone from the academy. He didn't know any other Genin teams that graduated at the same time as them. They hadn't mingled with other teams, hadn't collaborated on missions, and hadn't had joint training sessions. Even their border patrols and missions within the villages had been kept separate from other teams. The first time that Naruto could remember properly working with and getting to know other shinobi outside his tiny social circle was his job at the desk. Since then, he'd gotten to know almost every other shinobi in Konoha. It was the nature of handing out missions, but he hadn't realized how cut off his team had been. He knew part of what had cut him off was the village's lingering animosity towards Ryo, and he was fine with that. But he hadn't realized how much he had lost by racing through the academy. He shook it off as Kazuya turned to him. He had made his choice a long time ago, and he didn't regret it. Everything he had done was for Ryo and his future. What was done, was done. They had to get out of the orphanage, and graduating was the only option. He wouldn't be here forever, so he had to make sure Ryo and Sasuke got the best chance possible. Even if it meant that he missed out on a thing or two. Then, what do you suggest we do? Kazuya raised an eyebrow. He's excelling enough on his own that we can't really tell him that he needs other kids his age. I don't know, Naruto sighed. We just have to keep supporting him and making sure he knows he's not alone. I've been helping with his chakra control, so he's okay with accepting help. I was thinking of asking Guy to make up training menus for him and Ryo too. It sounds like you've got it under control. Iruka cut in, and they both turned to him. In my opinion, Sasuke not only has what it takes to graduate in 2 years, but is on course to be Rookie of the Year. Iruka shuffled the papers in his hands and cleared his throat. Now, Uzumaki Norio is another story. Naruto narrowed his eyes. While generally in the middle of the class in terms of his written exams, his mathematics and science scores are usually borderline passes. His taijutsu and weapon handling are good, but his chakra control is abysmal. He is still struggling with the leaf exercise, which does not bode well for his genjutsu, nor his ninjutsu. Chakra control? Ryo hadn't said anything about that. Why hadn't he just asked for help? His behavior in class can be disruptive. Iruka continued harshly. The group he sits with are at the bottom of the class, and he is prone to letting himself get distracted. He continually argues with the civilian children and speaks out of turn in class. Wait, what are the civilian kids saying to him? Naruto demanded. Why do you assume that they're at fault? Ryo doesn't start fights, Naruto snapped back. He just hangs out with his friends who are, kids, who tend to get distracted when they have to sit still for hours. They're still passing your class, right? What Naruto means to say, Kazuya placed a calming hand on his shoulder, is that it's unusual for Ryo to pick fights out of the blue. It's not who he is. Speaking to the kids, Norio is the aggressor. Iruka's fist clenched in his lap. Of course they would say that. Naruto growled. He should have known. He should have known Ryo wouldn't be left alone. He had been there to provide a buffer before, but in the academy Ryo was on his own. The parents who had suffered in the Kyuubi attack had passed their hatred to their kids. Also, why are you still calling him Norio? He continued hotly. He would have asked you by now just to call him by his name. Norio is the name on the official documentation, so Iruka began, but Naruto lost it. Don't give me that. He shot up from his seat, slamming his hands on the desk. It's the Kyuubi, isn't it? Iruka stared back at him in shock, but Naruto bulldozed on before the man could speak. If I find out you are treating him any differently, or putting him at a disadvantage, I will find out. He is a child who has suffered just as much from that night as anyone else. I am treating him just like I would any other student. Iruka shot back, standing to face him. Are you fuck? Naruto felt the fire running through his veins. He hadn't been so angry in a long time. Kazuya slowly stood next to him and moved out from behind the desk. Okay, I think tensions are running a bit high and this escalated quickly. He started calmly. Naruto is a bit overprotective of his little brother and Iruka-san. I think you are being a bit harsh on Ryo, compared to your other students. This can easily be fixed, yeah? Naruto huffed and crossed his arms. We're done here, he scoffed. I'll work with them on the issues you brought up at home, but I better not hear about any more altercations with the civilian kids or about him being looked over. He stalked out of the classroom, leaving Kazuya behind. He had no idea what Kazuya was saying to the teacher, and he didn't want to know. He had bigger issues to think about. Ryo hadn't been telling him everything, and he needed to figure out why. He stopped just outside the entrance to the academy at the sound of someone sniffling. He looked over to the swing beneath the nearby tree to see a kid crying. His head was bowed and his hands were clasped in his lap. Naruto paused before he sighed, already knowing his decision, even as his feet took him over to the swing. Hey, you okay? The kid's head snapped up and Naruto took in the huge round eyes and massive black eyebrows. His black hair was parted either side of his forehead, and a long, thick braid fell down his back. His eyes were red and his face covered in snot, so he'd been crying for a while. I'm fine, he stuttered, sniffling loudly. Yeah, and I'm actually the Tsuchikage. Naruto grinned. Come on, what's up? You'll feel better letting it all out, and I won't tell anyone. The boy dropped his head, and Naruto moved to rest his back against the tree trunk, sliding down to sit. I've just entered my final year in the academy, but I'm going to fail, the boy admitted, his voice breaking. I'm never going to be a shinobi. Why do you think you're going to fail? I can't use chakra, the boy wailed, fresh tears pouring out. I can't pass the exam without ninjutsu or genjutsu. Naruto considered his words. What's your name? Rock Lee. Well, Lee-kun, how is your taijutsu? The boy's head snapped up and he stared. What? Naruto held up his left arm. He tapped his brace lightly. I can't use chakra in this arm, he expanded. Accident when I was younger, so I had to come up with alternative ways to fight. You've made it to your 4th year, Lee-kun, so obviously you must be brilliant at other parts of being a shinobi to make up for your lack of chakra. Lee's eyes widened at his words. I know a guy who can make you a training menu for taijutsu. Naruto found himself offering before he could think it through. I can also help you with training from time to time, if you want. Are you serious? Lee demanded, surging forward. Wait, are you a student too? Naruto chuckled. It seemed even after his growth spurt, it still wasn't enough to age him out of the academy. Nah, I'm a chunin. Uzumaki Naruto. My kids are in their 3rd year here. Your kids? Lee looked confused, but Naruto waved it off, hauling himself up. Meet me at training grounds 6 Sunday at noon, okay? Lee shot to his feet and Naruto was dismayed to note that he only came to Lee's eye level, and he was 2 years older than the kid too. Maybe it wasn't that he was hanging around adults, maybe he was just destined to be short. Kazuya was at least 5 inches taller than him, but he was 15, almost 16. He was in the middle of his teen years. Naruto was just 13. Yes, sensei? Right. Naruto chuckled awkwardly, and he walked away, but he could no longer hear the boy crying. He mentally added the meeting to the ever-growing list he was writing in his head. First off, home, to see if the kids and Momo had managed to keep the apartment in one piece. Kazuya hurried out of the bathroom and maneuvered around the kunai being thrown around the flat. Sasuke and Ryo passed the weapons between them in a game of catch, and Kazuya had all but given up, telling them to stop. They had stopped leaving holes in the wall, so he saw no reason for them not to continue. He was a chunin, so if he got hit, really he had it coming. Momo was fast asleep under the table, so she was safe. The front door opened and Naruto trudged in, his shoulders slumped and hair limp in a low ponytail. Hey guys! Shit, Nii-san! Kazuya watched in horror as one of the kunai went straight for his friend. Naruto didn't even try to dodge as the kunai lodged itself in his thigh. He looked tiredly down at the weapon for a long moment before raising his head. Well, that's fair, he sighed deeply. It's mine now, though. Bleed on it, it's yours and all that. Kazuya hurried forward and helped his friend to a seat. The 2 younger boys hovered over his shoulder, but Kazuya waved them away. It wasn't that deep, and it only took a couple minutes to seal up. Looking up, he could see the dark bags under Naruto's eyes. He must have been exhausted not to notice that kunai coming at him. "You're dressed up nice." Kazuya looked down at his outfit. Black leggings and black, heeled boots paired with a long, flowing, purple tunic with a deep V-neck cinched in at the waist with a thin black belt. He had lined his eyes with black ink and tamed his hair up from his forehead for once. "Yeah, I have a date tonight." Naruto squinted at him. "A date?" "Yeah, a guy at work asked me out today." Kazuya smiled softly at the memory. "He's a few years older and a chunin, but I really like him. I've seen him around for a while and I thought, hey, I've just turned 16, why not?" Something unreadable crossed over Naruto's face. That's great, Kazuya," he finally said. "You deserve to find someone great." He smiled widely before it sharpened into a smirk. "Just make sure he knows to treat you right, otherwise he might need to spend your next date at the hospital." "Aka-chan, I'm just looking out for you." Naruto held up his hands as he laughed, but there was a glint of steel in his eyes. "That goes for me too." Kazuya turned to see Ryo standing with his arms crossed. Sasuke stood not far behind and offered him a short nod. He felt warm. They were always there for him. He hoped things had gotten better for them at the academy since that meeting with Iruka 2 months ago. He had rarely ever seen Naruto so mad, but he kind of got where Iruka was coming from. If he hadn't known Ryo practically from birth, he probably would have had reservations too. He just hoped his talk with Iruka had helped the man see it from their point of view. It helped that he was pretty cute too. He shook his head as he stood from his crouch. Tetsuya-san would be waiting for him soon. "So where are you going?" Naruto asked teasingly. "That yakitori place near to the dango shop?" Kazuya answered back eagerly, dying to tell someone. "I'm meeting him in front of the hospital in half an hour." "Wait, isn't he supposed to pick you up, Kazuni?" Ryo piped up, leaning on the sofa. "I heard that you're supposed to be picked up and given flowers and escorted everywhere, and he pays for everything." "And where did you hear this?" Kazuya asked him, amused. "Sakura and Ino talk about dating all the time," Ryo groaned. "They're always trying to get Sasuke to go on a date with one of them and end up fighting over it." Kazuya looked at Sasuke and the boy looked uncomfortable. "They won't take no for an answer?" he huffed. "None of them will. I was put into a group with Sakura for stealth and she blew it in the first 5 minutes trying to get my attention." Kazuya exchanged a look with Naruto. "I'll speak to your teacher." Kazuya shot out hurriedly before Naruto could speak up. "Inappropriate behavior shouldn't hold back your education." Sasuke looked back at him in surprise, but Kazuya didn't overthink it. He knew they weren't as close as Sasuke was to Naruto, and that was okay. He was still here to support the kid. He also didn't want to unleash Naruto on the poor teacher again. That wouldn't get anything done. He glanced at the clock and swore, grabbing a pouch and securing it to his belt. "I'm off," he called behind him. "Try not to get stabbed again before I get back." "Got your weapons on you?" "What kind of shinobi do you think I am?" He closed the door behind him and made his way to the hospital. Now he was alone and had time to think. The nerves were starting to settle in. What if they ran out of things to talk about? What if he was boring? What if he spilled food all over him? What if Tetsuya-san thought he was too young? There was about 4 years between them, and Kazuya had always felt older than he was. But what if Tetsuya-san didn't agree? Kazuya didn't know what he was doing. He had never done this before. The hospital finally came into sight, and Kazuya swallowed at the sight of Tetsuya-san waiting for him. He was tall with broad shoulders and wavy dark blonde hair. It was brushed back off his face, and his stumble was visible from even a short distance. He had always looked strong and sturdy when Kazuya had seen him around the hospital, and that feeling was only amplified by seeing him up close. His honey-brown eyes lit up when he spotted Kazuya approaching, and he turned to face him. "Kazuya-kun, you look amazing." Kazuya could feel the blush blossom across his face. "Thanks, Tetsuya-san," he smiled. "You too." "Should we go then?" Tetsuya-san grinned, and they headed off side by side. Kazuya took a deep breath as he looked up at his fellow chunin. He could do this, he could go on a date. His eyes widened as Tetsuya-san's hand found his own, and he stared at him in surprise. "Is this okay?" Kazuya felt the warm, coarse skin gently holding his own, and he gave it a squeeze. Yeah, it is. Ryo glared at the leaf as it shot away from him. Too much chakra, again. Why couldn't he get this? Misan made it look so easy, and Sasuke could do it no problem. Why was this so hard for him? He felt like he had an endless well of chakra inside him. It was like trying to control the ocean. But if Misan could do it, he should be able to. He had to make Misan proud. How was he supposed to be Hokage someday if he couldn't master some dumb little chakra control exercise? Misan always offered his help, but Ryo wanted to succeed on his own. Homework was one thing. Maths was hard, and he needed all the help he could get for his written exams. Shinobi skills, though, Ryo should be able to get them. Misan did when he was younger than him. Misan made Chunin when he was Ryo's age. What would he think if he knew how much Ryo was really struggling with his chakra studies? He growled and kicked the leaf away, stomping over to sit on his own at the corner of the playground. He soon saw shadows fall over him, and he looked up. Great, he groaned. Just what he needed. So Uzumaki fails again, huh? The first girl sneered. What a surprise. Not. This sparked a round of laughter, and Ryo rolled his eyes. These civilian kids just did not let up. These girls especially hated him. They hung around Sakura and Ino when they fawned over Sasuke, and he personally didn't think they were kunoichi material. They didn't hold a candle to Hana Nichin. At least the clan kids left him alone. You should just quit, the second girl hissed, pointing a finger. It's not like the teachers would ever let a monster like you graduate anyway. He should probably learn their names before he graduates. He knew this all stemmed from the bullshit with Kyuubi, but it was still tiring to deal with this almost every day. Plus, if he fought back, he was the one who got in trouble. Things had gotten a bit better since Nisan and Kazumi had that meeting with his teacher in January. But now it was May, and with the arrival of Mizuki-sensei, things had started to slide back to how it used to be. What can you expect? The third girl sniped. It's not like he has any parents to teach him how to do anything right. Yeah, his parents didn't want him. Probably the reason he sucks so bad at chakra control. Ryo watched as his knuckles turned white. He couldn't blow up. Mizuki-sensei would give him detention again. He knew what they said wasn't true. His parents had loved him. Nisan told him lots of stories, and even if they weren't there, he had Nisan and Kazumi. They were better than any parents. Am I bad at chakra control? Ryo looked over to see Sasuke standing next to them. He hadn't even heard the other boy approach while he was trying to contain his anger. Of course not, Sasuke-kun. One of the girls simpered. Why would you say that? Ryo cringed at Sasuke's face. He was angry, a great deal angrier than Ryo had ever seen him. I don't have parents. By your logic, I shouldn't be good at anything either. Ryo could have heard a pin drop in the silence that followed. Sasuke-kun? Fuck off, Sasuke scowled as he came to stand in front of Ryo. Making fun of others for losing their family is disgusting and unforgivable. Don't ever come near him or me again. The three girls almost tripped over themselves in their efforts to get away, and Ryo stared up in awe at Sasuke's back. The other boy stood his ground for a long moment, glaring at their classmates, before he let out a breath and sat down beside him. Thanks, Sasuke, Ryo mumbled out, still staring at him in awe. Although it was coming up to 2 years since Sasuke had moved next door, he and Ryo had never been particularly close. Ryo would count the other boy among his friends, but he wasn't sure that it was reciprocated. There had been a bond there, of course. How couldn't there be after sharing the same space for so long? But there was a difference between the relationship of friendship and family. They trained together, ate together, and studied together, but they never really hung out together. Not like Ryo did with Kiba. Kiba didn't understand why he was so targeted. Sasuke did, since they had told him during the last Rena festival. Nisan had argued it was only right since he was practically living with them, and it was hard to explain why they treated the Yondaime's grave like family would rather than with hero worship like the rest of Konoha. Ryo had given his permission since Nisan wasn't about to tell anyone about the Kyuubi without his consent, and he trusted Sasuke. Looks like he made the right decision. It was nothing. Sasuke waved it off. Maybe to you, but it was everything to me, Ryo replied quietly. Sasuke's head snapped towards him, but before he could say anything, Kiba bounded over. "Hey, I saw the civilian vultures over here," he said quickly. "You okay?" "Yeah, Sasuke scared them off for me." Ryo grinned, and it felt more genuine than he ever usually did during school hours. "I don't think they'll be back anytime soon." Kiba frowned as he looked between the two of them. "So when did you and Pretty Boy get so close?" Kiba muttered grumpily. Ryo's grin fell as he watched Sasuke's face shut down. He glared at Kiba. "Hey, his name is Sasuke," he said pointedly. "Lay off him, he's my friend." Kiba scoffed, crossing his arms. "You know, you don't have to be friends with him just because your brother took him in," Kiba shot out. "Narani won't care if you ditch him during school. He's just some stray anyway." Sasuke began to rise, but Ryo grabbed his arm, still glaring at his best friend. "He is my friend, Kiba," he snapped back. "You have no right to talk to him like that. You should say sorry." Kiba huffed and balled his fists. "Like hell. Fine, have fun with your new best friend. See if I care." He stomped off, Akamaru following at his heels and throwing sad glances to Ryo every few steps. Ryo let out a heavy sigh and let go of Sasuke's arm. "Are you sure about this? He's your best friend," Sasuke said quietly. Ryo turned and tried a reassuring smile like Misan would give. "He is, and that means I know when he's being a jealous ass." He shook his head. "He's an Inuzuka and they're territorial. It wasn't so bad when we met Shikamaru and Choji, since he still knew he was my #1 friend. But I just chose you over him. I did it because it was the right thing to do, but he doesn't see it that way." Sasuke mulled over his words, so Ryo continued. "Just because I'm better friends with him doesn't give him permission to treat my other friends badly." Sasuke opened his mouth and closed it again. "Oh." The bell rang, and Ryo bounced to his feet, turning to offer Sasuke a hand. The Uchiha eyed the limb for a short moment before he took it, and Ryo hauled him up. As they headed off to class, Ryo couldn't help but feel that something had changed for the better. Asuma stood in front of the mission assignment desk, trying not to awkwardly fidget in front of his father. Since he had returned to Konoha, he had only spoken to the Hokage twice. Once to announce his return, and the other with Kurenai and Guy for Kakashi's sake. He had managed to get his missions at times when his father was attending other duties, but this time he hadn't been so lucky. His hand twitched toward his pocket, he was dying for a smoke. "Well, Sarutobi-san, you have your orders." The desk Chunin behind the desk was interrupted by the door behind them banging open. Asuma turned to see a kid stumble into the room. He looked terrible. His orange t-shirt was hanging off him, and his black baggy sweatpants were rumpled and stained. He was missing his shoes, and his long red hair was escaping his messy, half-hearted ponytail. Dark bags lined tired blue eyes, and Asuma's eyes widened at the sight of the tattoos trailing up into his left sleeve. "Naruto-kun," his father stated, a note of surprise in his voice. "Are you well?" "Naruto? One of the early graduates from 6 years ago? Where was his team? Wasn't it Genma who got the early grads? Wasn't the kid supposed to be with his Jinin team at this time of day?" "I'm fine, Hokage-sama." The kid barely stood to attention. "Naruto-kun, tell me what happened," the Hokage insisted. "I just sat down last night to finally get some fuinjutsu done, but Momo knocked over the ink pot, so I had to clean it all up, and when I sat back down, I closed my eyes for just a second, and then it was the next day." Naruto was scowling down at the floor. "I saw the clock, and I know I'm supposed to be on front desk duty today, and this is the first time I've ever been late to a shift." "Naruto-kun?" His father held up his hand. "Go home. Get some rest. Consider this part of your annual leave, which you were really supposed to take earlier in the year anyway. I know you have a lot on your plate right now." "I am perfectly capable of performing my duties, Hokage-sama," Naruto ground out. "Just like any other shinobi in your forces. My plate is fine." Asuma's gaze bounced between the pair. So the kid had made it to Chunin while he was gone and worked at the desk no less. The strange thing was the dynamic between him and the Hokage. His father was treating the boy casually, with unusual consideration compared to how he usually interacted with his shinobi. Naruto, on the other hand, was rejecting any friendly offering and trying to create emotional distance by force. He wouldn't be surprised to hear that his father had screwed up like he had with him 7 years ago. Being Hokage wasn't conducive to maintaining healthy relationships. That's an order, Naruto-kun, the Hokage stated firmly. You've been working non-stop and taking annual leave is mandatory despite what you may believe. I will alert your colleagues to expect you back a week from today. Asuma watched the boy try to rein in his temper. While his blue eyes burned, much of the intimidation was lost when he looked so run down. Anyone who took one look at the kid could see he needed a break. Yes, Hokage-sama. Naruto bowed and turned in proper form, the picture of an obedient shinobi. He marched out the room and swung the door closed with an even louder bang than when he had entered. Silence fell over the room for a long moment. He's just under a lot of pressure, Hokage-sama, one of the Chunin piped up. The intelligence division has been on him to update their security SEAL network, so he has twice the workload right now. His father's face was unreadable. He had hated that look when he was a kid. Sarutobi-san. Asuma turned to see a Chunin holding out a scroll. He nodded, took the scroll and thanked them, stepping back and bowing slightly. He made his way out of the administrative buildings, distracted by his thoughts on the kid. Genma was the kid's Junin sensei as far as he could remember. Maybe he should say something when he next saw him. Naruto stomped into his flat, slamming the door behind him. He had screwed up. He hadn't even noticed he wasn't dressed when he left for the office. Ryo and Sasuke had left for a 3-day training exercise and wouldn't be back until tomorrow, while Kazuya had left yesterday evening for a late shift but hadn't come back yet. He knew he was seeing Tetsuya-san again. It seemed 8 months was the not coming home marker for a relationship. He looked down when he felt soft fur brushing his feet. At least you're here, Momo, Naruto smiled tiredly. You can't judge me or tell me off. She looked up at him and nudged his leg. Although she couldn't use chakra, he knew she was far more intelligent than the average dog. He had underestimated how much he would come to depend on her with everything else piling up. He sat down where he stood and buried his face in her fur, trying to surpass a cough. He had so much to do. He would have a massive backlog to complete when he got back next week, and the intelligence division were still after the rest of those seals. The hospital had also put in an order for the medical seals that he had made for Kazuya over the years. Sasuke was progressing through the rock exercises nicely, and Ryo's taijutsu had come a long way, but they both still needed a lot of training. Lee still needed taijutsu training too, and he graduated in a couple months, so he would have to push the boy even harder. Tenjiro had done his back-end, so he had been roped into deliveries while walking Momo. He barely had time to squeeze in his own training, and he hadn't been able to learn anything new in months. Sometimes he just wanted to cry. To just sit and curl up in a ball in a dark corner somewhere and forget everything. The list never got any smaller. It just got so overwhelming at times. Like no matter what he did, it didn't make a dent, so it gave him no place to start. But if he didn't do it, who would? Who would make sure that Ryo and Sasuke were up and dressed for the academy each morning? Or that Momo was fed and brushed? Or that Lee became a genin? Or that Konoha had decent fuinjutsu backing it up? He lifted his head and ran his hand through Momo's fur, using the sensation to ground him. He had the day off now. What could he do? He could finish off some seals, but he needed to be perfectly calm for that. He coughed into his free hand and groaned. He had been feeling ill for days now, but he didn't have time to be unwell. He stood on shaky legs and walked to his room, Momo trotting at his heels and her soft brown eyes glued to his back. He grabbed the large corkboard that had been propped up against a wall and started to drag it to the door. He stopped and grabbed a blanket on his way out. After some maneuvering, he finally managed to prop the board up onto the wall, and he fell back onto the sofa that faced it, wrapping himself in the blue, fluffy blanket. It had been a present from Hana last year, and it was one of the best things he owned. He tried to suppress the racking coughs that rose up within his throat, but they were forced out of him. Looks like another chest cold, Naruto said to Momo, who hopped up to sit on his legs. This is my 3rd one this year. The last one I went hoarse for 2 days with how bad my throat was. Remember that? Yakushi-sensei said I'm prone to stuff hitting my lungs. Good thing Kazuya only knew about that one. He would flip if knew I was ill without telling him. He leaned back into the couch as he turned his attention to the board. The Hokage may have told him to leave the Uchiha massacre alone, but Naruto couldn't help himself. There were too many things off about that night, and the more he dug, the less it added up. Why that night in particular? Things had been tense with the Uchiha leading up to that night, but there had to have been a catalyst. He looked over to the photo of Uchiha Shisui he had pinned in one corner. He had died almost a year before the massacre, and his body was found by one of Konoha's rivers, missing his eyes. He hadn't really thought anything of it at the time. It was ruled as a suicide and came under Uchiha jurisdiction. Now, though, he felt like it was something more. Uchihas were famous for their Sharingan. It couldn't be coincidence that Shisui was missing his. The paperwork for the body identification missions carried out after the massacre was pinned to the board below Shisui's picture. No one had reported anything off about the bodies, but Naruto worked in an office. He knew how to falsify mission reports, and he wasn't ignorant enough to discount that as a possibility. He then turned to glare at the question mark on the other side of the board, grabbing a wayward tissue from the coffee table to cough into. The unexplained Uchiha. The one who killed the Uchiha in the police headquarters and potentially more. The one he had never felt before. Why was Itachi so hell-bent on insisting he carried out the massacre alone? Why did the Hokage agree with him? The Hokage was covering something up and Naruto had no idea what it was. He was missing a huge part of this puzzle, the piece to tie it all together. He knew there was something there, just hidden from view within the shadows, but he didn't have the right information to see it. His gaze was torn from the board as racking coughs were torn from his throat. He hunched over, trying to expel the blockage at the back of his throat. Heaving, something finally gave, and he spat it out. He uncurled and rested his head on the back of the sofa, breathing heavily. That had been a bad one. He actually thought for a moment that the coughs would be enough to make him puke. He may not trust the Hokage anymore, but the old man might have a point. He might need to take it easy, at least for today. He didn't need any more episodes like that. He lifted his head and a glint of red caught his eye. Eyes wide in horror, he stared at the spots of blood covering the tissue. Oh no. Oh no. It's probably nothing. He just coughed too hard and irritated his throat or something. It couldn't be his lungs, not yet. It was too soon. Or was it? He had been 6 when he got the diagnosis. He was now barely 14, so it had already been, 8 years? That was almost half of the time they had given him. He hadn't exactly been kind to himself either, and he knew he was getting sick more often due to running himself down. This wasn't a surprise. He had always known he would start to get worse. Momo wiggled up to shove her snout into his chest, and he dropped his free hand to automatically start rubbing her head. It would be okay. He still had years left. He would just have to be more careful. Maybe take Yakushi-sensei's warnings about managing his time more seriously. No need to worry anyone about this. He would be fine. It was just a cold right now. A slightly worse cold than usual, but nothing he couldn't handle. He had too much to do. He would stay in today and work on Fuinjutsu, but he had to be up and running again by the time the kids came home tomorrow. Who knows when Kazuya would come home? He knew the older boy had another shift today. Kakashi was also supposed to drop round tomorrow to see Ryo. He groaned as the mental strain started building itself up again. It was fine. He could do this. This cold would let up in a few days, and then it would be business as normal. He had time. A little blood didn't mean anything. As another cough worked its way up his throat, Naruto couldn't quite bring himself to believe it. Thank you for watching part 4 of What If Naruto Parents Died and Naruto Becomes Shinobi to Protect His Brother. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Anime T23 for more exciting what-if scenarios and anime content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next episode.